So, all right. Well, here we go.
Let's do it, man.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, in association with Max Allan Collins, brings you the upcoming crowd-funded audio drama True Noir, the Nathan Heller Casebooks, starring Captain Liam Shaw himself from Picard Season 3, Todd Stashwick, as the titular detective Nathan Heller, who began his career as an officer of the Chicago PD before rising up to becoming Private Eye to the Stars. Look for the crowdfunding campaign soon. Greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your Master of Fun and Wonder, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your Sommelier of Sci-Fi, your Evangelist of the Imagination, and the perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Robcasting at you from the Robservatory. You Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity. This episode of Robservations, the very first of 2024, is episode number 916 as we march forward to that 1,000th episode. And for those of you who asked, yes, it will be 1,000 minutes long. So that's over 16 hours. And how I'm going to fill that, I don't know. But I've got at least, 85 more episodes to figure that one out, or 84. Now, today's episode is the second part of the Axanar Revelations that we will be talking about, the fan film debacle that has been going on for the last 9 years. It really began in earnest in March of 2014, where a short film, Prelude to Axanar, link is in the description below, was crowdfunded. They asked for $10,000 and they got $100,000. And it's a 20-minute Star Trek short film that is meant to be canonical in universe. It has many actors that you would recognize, such as Tony Todd and Richard Hatch and Gary Graham coming back and playing Soval again from Star Trek Enterprise. And it's a well-told story that was beautifully produced. The money was raised in March. The film was shot in May, and I completed it and got it down to at the very last minute, because we had to swap out a lot of the green screen compositing, to Comic-Con in July of 2014. So from soup to nuts, we went from March, the crowdfunding campaign, to the finished Prelude to Axanar that debuted in a movie theater in San Diego. So soup to nuts, March, April, May, June, July. 5 months from the beginning of the crowdfunding campaign to showing the movie in a movie theater to hundreds of people. Now, that movie was a little over 20 minutes long, and a lot happened between here and there. And it is a well-told story, which I won't bore you with, but I'm going to bring on somebody who is 9 years later still in battle. Actually, this is now the 10th year. 2014 marks the 10th year. 2024 marks the 10th year since 2014 where the film debuted. But this saga, now entering its 10th year, is still continuing. And it is a tale of dread and horror and brutality, the likes of which you've never heard before. And to tell this tale and to talk about where we're at, I want to bring on Eisner Award winner, BAFTA winner, a great man, a great writer. I mean, the man wrote Wolverine Origin. He wrote The Inhumans. Mr. Paul Jenkins. Paul, welcome once again to Robservations.
That's a great intro. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. And I hope you're doing well. I hope everyone's well out there. I think tonight's going to be a very, very enlightening conversation about Axanar. I should do a bit of order of business before we start. It turns out that my computer has a fantastic ability to lose its handshake with Rob's stream. So every so often there'll be a 15-second penalty thrown and my screen will go black. We dealt with this last time. Apologize in advance for any technical issues that we seem to have, but it comes right back. So if I'm in the middle of explaining something, Rob, I expect you to kind of roll with it and take the...
I will roll with it. And I just want to point out that for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Axanar project, in the links below, there is Prelude to Axanar, the Vulcan scene, which I directed, and there are 3 videos that I made called Axanar Origins, which is what I happened to be working on when the project was hit by a lawsuit with by CBS and Paramount. It's a really interesting story, but those are the only things that were ever completed on what was going to be a feature film, the Axanar feature film. So what happened was we crowdfunded money to make Prelude and got $100,000. It was produced by Christian Gossett and the people at Metamorphic Studios, including Jennifer Weberly. It went off without a hitch. It shot over the course of 2 days, and then there was a third day with some things were being picked up for effects reasons. And the money was, the $100,000 was absolutely well spent. Anybody who worked on Prelude to Axanar could tell you it was as professional as it gets in terms of Hollywood productions. The actors certainly said all of that. We finished on time. We finished on budget. And again, that was shot in May. The finished film debuted 2.5 months later at Comic-Con. And because I finished it. I did all the editorial on it. I oversaw the visual effects, which were completed. The space effects were done by the great Tobias Richter and Lightworks Entertainment in Germany. And Tommy Kraft did all of the blue screen compositing. And it was a joy to interface with both of them. And I oversaw the post-production, the putting together of it all. Frank Serafini, who worked on Star Trek The Motion Picture, did a lot of the sound design, accompanied by Mark Edward Lewis. And Alexander Bornstein wrote the amazing original score. And to this day, I'm still working with Alexander Bornstein and Tobias Richter. Both men had work in my latest feature film, Tango Shalom, that was playing in Germany in October. So the relationships that I forged during this process, I have continued to keep up with, and I've continued to do good work with both of those gentlemen. And I'll just leave it there.
Well, you and I have known each other for 20 plus years now.
Yes.
Man. So, we sort of dropped out of touch a little bit, but, what I find is that there's these great people are involved around here. Chris Gossett is a great guy. And, I've gotten to know him a little bit more because we sort of share adversity. I think you, myself, and Christian have
Three Musketeers.
The 3 Musketeers, but I'm not sure it's a musketeer that anybody wants to be, I think I'm pathos.
Well, I always wanted to be D'Artagnan, but that means we'd need another. And I'm sure we'll have another. Somebody else is going to join our ranks soon. And I would like to say that the man who we're going to be talking a lot about, Alec Peters, the last time we were together, put a copyright strike on my channel, and he actually claimed in the thing that he claimed, the 17-minute introduction, he did claim part of the sizzle reel I made for Prelude to Axanar and the Vulcan scene I directed that had Soval in it, Gary Graham playing Soval. So Alec Peters did claim copyright over Star Trek. Again. So, and the YouTube, it is an actual, when you do that to somebody's channel, you open up a legal, and then he threatened me after he said, if I counterclaimed on YouTube, which is what you do if somebody's doing it maliciously to you, he threatened to sue me in federal court. I did, in fact, file a counterclaim, which is an actual legal proceeding. Then the onus falls to him to prove that he owns the copyrights to a lot of the Star Trek iconography, his own deposition that you paid for. He was claiming copyright over all of that, which... he doesn't, and yet he did claim it in an unofficial legal proceeding. Anyone
can claim anything, Rob. Right? Anybody can say anything, as we've already ascertained. Anybody can sue anybody for any reason if they want to. And so I think that we're living in this kind of situation, you and I, where you've got someone that's extremely litigious who, once he sued me and my company, we had to countersue for vexatious litigation as one of the problems that we had, So, you see the problem. And I do think that what happened is you and I did a broadcast last time. And this time I think we're going to be a little bit more clinical. But we did a broadcast in which we kind of exposed some of the questions surrounding the spending on Axanar. And we were able to do that with documentation that we brought. And so tonight, we're going to do a full deep dive. And I guess my feeling is that Alec Peters wanted to make sure that nobody could see that broadcast of yours because of that. Well, we're going to do it from top to bottom today. We're going to take a look at the spending and we're going to take a look at the cross-referencing. And so I'm going to try and explain a little of that, and you and I can talk about it as we go.
And there's one thing I do want to point out. When you're making a movie, you have a budget, and you usually have a production accountant, and all of the money for the budget of the movie goes into one bank account and is overseen by a person. And I want to say that Christian Gossett, who directed Prelude to Axanar, brought in his people to produce the movie, and the money was used properly. It was spent the way it was supposed to be spent on the film, and you can see every dollar up on that screen. And Christian, who directed the film, and Jennifer Weberly and the people at Metamorphic made sure that that money was properly spent. And
that would be the trick, right? Let's say that you get this money in, you want to make a fan film especially, but you really want to give it great production values. What are you going to try and do? You're going to try to put that money up on screen. Now, if I'm a backer of Axanar, my expectation will be that if I give $10 or $50 or $200 or $10,000, my expectation is that the same thing that happened to Prelude is going to be happening to the Axanar film. I mean, that seems like a fair expectation, right?
That's what I believed. Mm-hmm. When I got involved, when I first got involved in this project, I got involved because of Christian Gossett. We'd been friends. He did a wonderful job directing Prelude. It was really interesting because the actors, they're supposed to be in it was like the Band of Brothers documentary. So you're watching this documentary, and Christian actually sat down with the actors and sort of pretended that he was a 23rd century reporter interviewing the actors, and he did the performances for the most part are extraordinary, and it was a really interesting way to do it. And I really thought this project was in great hands. That's why I signed on.
Yeah, and I had a conversation when I came on board. I was the sort of unsuspecting third director, right? Because I didn't really have any sense of any of what had happened before with this project. Had no sense of the lawsuit with you. Early on, actually, when I came on board, I reestablished contact with you and tried to help out because it clearly wasn't going very well. So, you remember that you and I talked about some issues that you'd been having with Alec Peters. And so you and I are friends, so I could just call you up and go, hey, man, what's going on here? And it was obvious that there was some challenges.
Well, I worked on this project. I was involved with Alec Peters. I considered Alec Peters a great friend. Mm-hmm. I stood by him during the entire lawsuit. So my stint on Axanar and those perks alone earned over $100,000 when we started to use Prelude itself to crowdfund to make the feature film. So I was expecting that we were going to make this feature film right on the heels of Prelude to Axanar. So my involvement was from April of 2014 when I officially resigned in November of 2017. So I was a part of this project almost every day of the first 3 years of its inception, including being at the warehouse space that we rented to shoot the movie in. I was there pretty much every day, 7 days a week for years. So I was a part of this project the whole time. And, I even tried to bring another company in Bexel. They blueprinted the studio. They were going to pay for it when we got sued by CBS. And I stood by Alec Peters that entire time. And I continued to do all kinds of work, develop the script with Bill Hunt. So it was pretty shocking how Alec Peters took my loyalty and all the work that I had done and threw it in my face and began to sue me both in California court, and then he sued me in Atlanta I'd never worked in Georgia. I'd never been to Georgia with him. And it cost me tens of thousands of dollars, which I'm still paying for.
And this is the thing. So, obviously, we're going to get into the sort of ups and downs of the money and the actual project itself. But I think what people need to understand, the most basic things are, there was about $1.3 million pledged on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but there's questions about how much money's actually been given to this project at this point.
Yep.
Certainly there will be money that was given in at conventions in cash. Certainly there's other products and there's merchandise that's been sold over time that's brought in money. So there's quite a lot of money that's come into this project, right?
And now, how much money would you say total? So we made Prelude to Axanar. $100,000 was pledged, the money was spent, and Prelude was made. Then we had 2 other crowdfunding campaigns. We used Prelude itself and crowdfunded that to make the feature film. Then a year later, I had made the VULCAN scene, and we used when I say I made it, I planned it, I directed it, I edited it, I post-supervised it, but I did have a crew, a great crew of people. Milton Santiago, who shot Prelude, also came on board to do that, and we were working on making this feature film. So we raised in those 2 million. What was it? 1.3 million total.
Well, it was 1.3 million between those 2 endeavors, right? But you're looking at cash that would have come in. You're looking at other things in terms of like the Axanar store, for example, other donations that would have come in. And, what's interesting is that tonight, what we're going to be able to show is actually some of these donations that did come in, some of the extra money that came in. There's all kinds of ways in which money came into this production. But, we really need to ask ourselves the question, how did the money come in? Where did it come to? How is it being used? And how was money being moved between what were essentially 2 accounts? And I think that's the first thing that you want to look at, which is, why does a production need 2 accounts? Why would you need 2 accounts?
You wouldn't.
Right. Now, I've asked myself the question, like, why would you need 2 accounts, right? I can't think of the answer, because ultimately it makes it a little bit harder to do your bookkeeping. If you're moving money in between 2 accounts, you are...
Well, that was one of those times when Paul fell out. We don't know why that happens. He's back
this
now.
is where we go, yeah.
It's all right.
So we know this is going to happen all night. So if you're moving money in between 2 accounts, you are then having to account for where the money, like you took it out of one account, you moved it to a different account. There's really no need to do that, I can't think, because ultimately you want to just get the money in that backers had given you for a fan film, account for that money, make sure you knew where it went, where it was spent, and when it came in, where it went out, right? That's very simple. Now with 2 accounts, it just makes it a little bit harder, because you're moving, but there's no justification, and there's certainly no justification sort of listed in the ledger that Alec Peters provided to CBS when the lawsuit happened. Basically gave them a detailed accounting of what money had been spent on, and famously that detailed accounting went a little awry, because he provided that detailed accounting. And CBS had a lot of questions about it. They certainly were concerned about the use of money on restaurants, according to their own legal documentation. They were concerned about money being spent on cars and tires and gasoline and things like that, phone bills. There's plenty of stuff. So you can look at it and you can say, if you're making a fan film, what's a good use of that money, Rob? Right? I think that's the first thing. And
to make the movie.
Prelude was a good use of the money.
It was.
So it doesn't seem a very good use of money, in my opinion, to then say, okay, we've got more money. Let's kind of like have a corporate entity, for example, and we'll have gasoline is going to be paid for, because I'm not sure that people who are investing their hard-earned money, someone may have put $30 in, but it might be the only $30 they had. They really wanted to see a Star Trek film. So the question can remain, certainly, is it fair for things like people's telephone, their cell phones to be paid for? Is it fair for this or that to be paid for? There's a question about that. You could maybe justify it, maybe not. And what I did was I went through all of these records to find out, was it fair? Were they accounted for? And so I want to kind of go to that. I want to take a look at what we have and bring it up on our screen, and then go piece by piece. So you and I can take a look at how a film might be made with the money that comes in. Sound good?
Yes, and that sounds great. And I just also wanted to point out that one of, I think, the biggest problem here is that Alec Peters thought of this money as his.
Mm-hmm.
It was not thought of as the production's money. And once he took over, and one of the first things he got rid of Christian's people. You know, Jennifer Weberly and the actual people that produced Prelude were kind of shunted aside, and Alec Peters wanted to have the spotlight. And I think that, from my perspective, I didn't really, because at first I wasn't directing the feature. Christian was still directing. But I should have, and this is where I should have from the very beginning said, okay, we should have a production accountant. I mean, I was the only person on that production that actually had produced a feature film, and I should have done more. I should have done more. And there should have been a third party giving all this money oversight, and there wasn't.
Yeah, you know, Rob, that kind of thing happens, I think, to any of us who've been directors on this project, actually, because one of the things that I asked myself was, should I have really stepped up a little bit when we began to shoot these scenes? You know, we were shooting what was essentially green screen stuff, and all of a sudden we're shooting like an action scene on the bridge, right? But that wasn't in the script, and it was never going to be used, right? So I had this conversation with Alec Peters, and I said, look, you know, why are we shooting people like getting hit by photon torpedoes and, like, you know, all that stuff? And the answer was, well, we're using it to raise more money, which I think had happened with the Vulcan scene, and it happened with Prelude, right? But that's not a good use of backer money, because at this point we're supposed to deliver these things. We're not supposed to deliver a thing that is intended to raise more money. That did not seem like a good idea in hindsight. I wish I had said at that point, we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, but for me, the entire time that I was there, because I've always had stars in my eyes, literally, figuratively, call it what you want, but I really wanted to make a Star Trek a feature fan film. That's what I wanted to do. And when I did the Vulcan scene, you know, to me, and there was almost a year between when Prelude, we did the Vulcan scene started in June of 2015. And so Prelude came out in July of 2014. We'd raised the money. We got into the studio. I had started in process of directing the movie, talking with Tobias about effects. I think we did 80 visual effects shots for the feature film, which you can see, there's links down below. But we should have rolled right into production. I mean, we should have but there was never a finished script for the feature. Right. Never. There was never a shootable script until I brought in Bill Hunt, because I had rewritten the Vulcan scene and brought him in because I didn't even like what I had written. And I said, Bill, can you write this? And so it was Bill Hunt. And it was like, why did a year take place? Why was there a year in between? Right. We could have done it.
And it's interesting. I've had a conversation with Bill Hunt about the process, right? And it's very reminiscent of the way that Alec Peters describes, you know, his relationship with me when I was writing the script. He describes the same thing to Bill, and he basically says, you know, Bill told me, you know, that Alec was barely interested in what was being written, which is typical. You know, that there were really not much input. But I do think that there's one thing that's quite compelling, actually. There's a piece of video of Alec Peters talking about Bill Hunt writing, where he trips over what he's actually going to say when he said, when Bill Hunt wrote, I mean, you know, collaborated, I mean, edited, I mean, you know what I mean, right? And it's like, yeah, you meant the first thing you said, which is he wrote the script, right?
Yeah, well, there was no, and so I worked with Bill. We worked for over a year crafting the script for the script that I wanted to make. And the feature film, and Mike Bodden can corroborate this. Once we had the lawsuit with CBS, I already had 80 effect shots for the feature. And when the lawsuit was over and CBS granted the opportunity to make 2 15-minute short films, I said, let's just shoot the first 30 pages of the screenplay. We already have the Vulcan scene, which was in those 30 pages. We have 80 effect shots. And like any good producer who knows anything about what Roger Corman used to do, we could have made, and I wanted to do 2 other green screen like Vulcan scene shoots, so we could have done them for very little money. And we could have had the 30 minutes of the movie. But Alec wanted to have the Battle of Axanar. And he wanted, rather than do it as a feature version, because I'd got him to agree to not play the lead character because he doesn't have the acting chops to do it, but he didn't want to do that. And so I could have done that, and we could have done it in 2017. before I resigned from the project. But Alec decided not to.
So I think, if you just look at it as the most clinical thing, the most simple, straightforward sort of way, it's 1.3 to maybe $2 million was raised and came in the door, right? Prelude was made for how much? $110,000, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's entirely conceivable that the 1.3 to $2 million, however much it ends up being, is capable of being made into a film that has the same production values and same excitement and all that kind of stuff of Prelude. Even if this, Robbie, you can concede this, even if it was just the other two 15-minute segments, it still could have been made for all the money that was raised quite easily.
Quite 100%, because if you look at it, even the Vulcan scene, I mean, Alec keeps inflating what it costs, but the Vulcan scene was about 3 minutes. Let's just say it cost $20,000 all in. It didn't, but let's say that it did. If you think about that, 20,000 times 3 minutes, 40,000, 6 minutes, 60,000, and you go from there and you can back into the numbers.
Yeah.
And for $1 million, if Prelude cost, let's say we had twice as much for each 20 minutes as Prelude. So if Prelude was $100,000, I'm sorry for that software thing, it does that. If you easily could have made a feature film the way we made Prelude, even as it wasn't going to be a documentary, but for $1 million, we should have absolutely been able to make the film.
Yeah, that group was capable of making the film. You were capable of making it. And so the question that then would come up, right? And I think I just want to do it like really clinically, like I said. The question would come up, I'm a backer of Axanar. I'm a fictional backer of Axanar. I gave $200 in, right? My expectation as a backer, I believe, would be that that I would give this money in. I've already seen the proof of concept and the model in Prelude to Axanar. So if, $1.3 million, even if that's the only number, right? That's certainly capable of making a film because I've already seen it done for $110,000.
Right,
and if
exactly.
That's 20 minutes long. If the Vulcan scene, how much did it actually cost, by the way, Rob? That Vulcan scene?
I would say it probably cost about 10.
So 10 grand, right?
I don't know what Tobias, because I'll tell you something. I don't know what anything cost. I don't know what anything cost because sorry about that, folks. Paul will come back. I don't know what anything cost because I never saw the books. I had never had, contrary to what Alex says, I didn't steal any money from donors. I did all the work. I delivered everything that Axanar ever finished. But I have no idea what anything cost because I never saw checks written for anything, and I had no idea where the money was being spent.
Right. And that raises a question. So, early on, you would look at a thing and you would say, okay, we want to go make a film. We want to try and recreate the production values of the Vulcan scene. If it's me and I've got this money and I've got this need to make a film, now let's say that we're arriving at a script. What do we do with that script? Well, we create a budget, right? Like that's where the money is. You look at it and you say, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm going to budget it. This is how I'm going to spend my money. So that's in place. So my question to you was there ever a budget prepared for that film?
No, there was no budget because there was no finished script.
Right.
And that was one of the great frustrations of the whole project. The script that was written there, I'm sure you saw it, was kind of Christian had worked on it, Alec had worked on it, but it was all over the place. And so what people need to understand is a movie they've been making movies for over 100 years. It's not rocket science to budget out a film. You can see exactly what things cost and what exactly what you're going to spend them on. And so all of this money was taken in, and there was no budget. There was no plan. There was no, and that was part of what I was doing when I took over as director. And we were having professional meetings. John Iacovelli, one of the production designers on Babylon 5, came into production design the film. And I think one of the great frustrations is every time we had these meetings, there was less and less money. Alec would say, you've got this. And we're like, why do we have less and less money?
Right.
So,
because that doesn't compute, right? Like where did the money run out from? Right. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, we did rent a warehouse to make this, and the warehouse, a lot of money went toward rent and toward upgrading the warehouse to make it a more shootable environment. We also built a huge green screen that was going to allow us to shoot against it. So that was a huge loss of money for the project. Now, in hindsight, should we have done that? Probably not. If we had planned before we moved in anywhere, we should have had the whole thing meticulously planned. But the idea was, once we showed people what we could do with the movie, we would be still in this facility, and we would, maybe this is only in my mind, I thought, okay, we're going to show people what we can do. I wanted to, because I was at the time working on feature films as well. I was editing a science fiction movie in 2015 called Paradox. I wanted to have a place where we could make movies. We'd have to go out and raise more money for independent productions, but that's why I brought in a Hollywood production company like Bexel to take over the warehouse, and they blueprinted the whole thing out. They were going to retrofit. That was another thing. Alec's like, you have no authority to do this. And I'm like, we're being sued, bro. You know, I'd like to get some money out of this. And we don't have any money. And so he killed that.
Right. And so, you know, I think then that history will tell us, even because history is now part of this thing, because it's 8 years ago this stuff happened, right? So it is history. Like, you can look back with the benefit of hindsight 10 years ago and go, this stuff started 10 years ago. So let's take a look back with the benefit of hindsight at what happened, right? We need to look, first of all, at you know, with all of this setup that we've talked about.
Yeah, I will stop interrupting you. I just keep feeling
no, you're still not interrupting me. But you can see, like, with all of the stuff that we're talking about, it's easy to see that enough money came in to make a film. And so the question that any Axanar backer, in my opinion, would have is, what happened to the money that was intended to go make a film? Because we can prove that it could be made for 110 grand with the Prelude. We prove that 10 grand, and if you call it 20, can make the Vulcan scene, right? So we have an expectation, in my opinion, that this film would be made, right?
Yeah.
So let's take a look a little bit at what is happening. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to guide us before we take a look at the numbers. I'm going to read you a few things that Alec Peters has said about the making of his film and about what happened to the money.
All right.
June 27th. We can bring up the other screen, and I'll actually just kind of, you know, maybe kind of if you want to share it, we can take a look at some of these that I brought up on the screen, right? He's responding in the first one that I'm reading here. He says he's happy to correct somebody that's talking to him. It's June the 27th, 2018. He put in over $150,000 for a whole host of reasons of his own money. And even if not sued, I would have spent a lot of my own money, et cetera, et cetera. At the end, he says, yeah, I get a little tired of people who have never read the financials trying to talk about them. Well, that's somewhat laughable, in my opinion, because the financials have never been made available to anybody, even though he has claimed that they have been made available. So that's not necessarily, that's a very disingenuous statement, right? I get tired of people who've never read the financial, as if it's the fault of the people who've never read them. They've never read them because they're not capable of reading them, because they've never had the financials that I'm about to show you tonight, right? No one had a copy of the bank accounts. No one had a copy of the document that he provided to CBS to justify his spending. Next one. He says, and I want to quote this, right? I used no donor money for anything personal. A fact proven at length. So his statement is, I never used any donor money for anything personal. And that's something that I feel that any backer can hold him to, right? He's said it so many times. I never used this for anything personal. In the third one right here, he's talking to Jonathan Lane. And he says that any Axanar donor could come over to the studio at any time to look over every receipt we ever paid and verify themselves that every penny of donations was spent on reasonable expenses. Okay, so he goes on to list the reasonable expenses, and he basically says everything is totally above board and not one penny to me for anything. So let's
I'm just sorry.
Quickly encapsulate, right? Tired of people that are talking about the financials that have never read them. Okay, we're going to remedy that tonight. I use no donor money for anything personal. Okay, then we'll look into that and see whether or not he did. And the last thing right here at the moment says everything's totally above board, no penny, not a penny to me. Another answer he then gave to Jonathan Lane. Jonathan Lane asked him the question, well, you pulled out in the second set of financials you gave to CBS, you pulled out all the tires and sushi receipts, to which Alec says, that was never charged to donor. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars out of my own pocket, keep Axanar going. I paid this, I paid that. And so he goes on to kind of say, you know, I have to be the most idiotic crook in the world. Tires for my car cost, what, a few $100s? You know, I pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, the question is, did you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars? Because if you're going to say that you paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, you better be able to back that up by showing people that you paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. In other words, you need books that are clearly airtight. Now, his claim repeatedly has been that his books are airtight, and we'll go into this one quickly. He says that Axanar produced detailed financials for the CBS Paramount lawsuit. Those detailed financials, just so that for anybody that's watching, are the detailed financials that we're going to take a look at tonight because we have a copy of it. In fact, Alec produced two sets of financials, one that showed the overall income and expenses of Axanar production, and one that was a subset that showed just the donor money received. Now, the subset are basically two-page documents that give a summation of money that was spent. I mean, there's no way to verify a two-page summary from Quicken saying, yeah, we promised that we spent, $200,000 on makeup or whatever, you know, like we promised, you know, we're not going to show you the receipts for it. You can't do that if you're going to tell people that you are showing them detailed finances. Now, they showed detailed finances. That is a breakdown of finances to CBS, and that's the finances we're going to take a look at tonight. Let me go on to finish this out. So it says, it should be noted that these financials were reviewed and approved by Axanar attorneys at Winston & Strawn, the Axanar accountant while Axanar was in LA, and then when Alec went to file taxes, they were approved by Fraser & Dieter, a company here in Atlanta where I live, the number one Atlanta accounting firm. A team of 3 people, 2 industry professionals, and a Wall Street analyst reviewed all the financials and produced a one-page report where they acknowledged that all expenses were legit and the financials handled by acceptable industry standards. Right now, his claim is that CBS and Paramount were so upset, right, about that their claims about Alec spending money on himself were false. So his claim is that CBS, when they claimed that Alec spent money on himself, he said those claims are false. So we're going to be able to take a look at that tonight and decide whether or not Alec Peters spent money on himself. But he said they were so upset and they sat through a second deposition, and essentially the general counsel of CBS told Alec and his lawyers, right, that the reason they sued him was because Axanar was too good. Now, Rob, you've been in this job for a long time. Do you think it's feasible or likely that CBS told Alec Peters the reason they sued him was because Axanar was too good?
Well, as much as I'm proud of everything that we did, and I'm proud of the VULCAN scene, even the VULCAN scene was supposed to be a proof of concept. And right. I can't imagine that anybody would ever say that. I mean, you know, right. Too good. What does that even mean? Too good. I mean, the funny thing is if you look at Star Trek Continues or James Cawley's, you know, Star Trek Phase 2, both of those fan productions are very, very good and do a wonderful job in recreating the look and feel of the original series. But no one's going to ever mistake them for actual Star Trek, as good as they are.
Right. And I think Prelude was fantastic. It did a really good job. The expectation would have been that Axanar would do a really good job, and people would look at it and say, I really like that. Like, well done, right? And maybe they might say, yeah, that's Star Trek, right? That's fine. It doesn't matter. But I tell you this right now, CBS complained about the misspending of the money because they had concerns about the misspending of the money, including money, according to CBS, being spent, too much money spent on restaurants, cars, tires, personal telephones, you know, cell phones, stuff like that. They complained about that in the lawsuit, and they said that they did not approve of that type of money. And their concern was that Alec Peters and whomever were enriching themselves using Star Trek to do so, right?
Yes.
So the last one that Alec, then this is literally from last week. This is Alec Peters writing last week about it. And he said basically, in this thing, no donor money went to Alec Peters, nor did donor money get spent on legitimate business expenses. I'm not sure what that means, actually, because that doesn't make sense. No donor money went to Alec Peters, nor did donor money get spent on legitimate business expenses like auto expenses or food and entertainment that benefited Alec Peters, right? So that's the claim. He goes on to blame Mike Borden for not releasing these things, but all you need to know is that he's saying these financials are backed up by detailed line item reports and receipts, and anybody can take a look at them. But no one has ever been able to take a look at these things. No one's ever been given a copy of the bank accounts. No one's ever been given a copy of what was supplied to CBS until tonight.
Well, I would also like to point out, like you said, there was only 2 bank accounts. Mm-hmm. And in terms, even expense reports or whatever, just cure the bank statements. Here's the money. Here's what bank it went into, and here are the bank statements. And it isn't complicated. And am I to understand then that you have this information, you have bank account information, and you have actual numbers?
Yes. I not only here are the 2 things that I'm going to show you tonight. I have the bank accounts from Axanar Productions in Woodland Terrace, Florida. Now, it does seem a little nonsensical that there are 2 bank accounts for this thing, as we've already said. And it certainly seems a bit nonsensical that one of them resides in Woodland Terrace, Orlando, Florida, because the problem with that is that Alec Peters at the time resided in California. And, the idea that there's a bank account that says Axanar Productions on it, and it is a business bank account. So we can ascertain that simply by looking at the customer service information and calling the number to make sure that it's a business bank account. But also, just so that we, are on the level here, so people understand what I've been doing. As I've been researching this, last night I was on the phone with essentially a forensic accountant, a fraud investigator who works with a couple of the larger banks, right? So this person was able to give me some real insight into what was being said, what the codes meant on these bank accounts. So it's absolute verification that the one that we're about to look at is a business bank account. So if you want to bring the screen up, Rob, let's go show everybody what it is that we have and how we can scrutinize the income of money, right? If you want to pull out a little bit.
Yeah, hang on. I can do that. Give you a minute here. Pull up and as that's what she said, but there you go.
Yeah. I said the actress of the bishop, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do it this way. We're going to go just step by step, Rob, so you and I can talk this through. Here is the Axanar Productions bank account. I'm going to show you from the very top, but you will understand this in a minute. Here's the very first month that I have, which is August. Here's some of the income that comes in. I'll give you an idea of the color coding that I put onto this. Here's checks. Here's ATM debit card withdrawals. Here's the debit card summaries. Here's electronic withdrawals and so on. We're going to go to the next one because it's just, I wrote up on this one because it's just easier to understand. Okay. So we've ascertained it is Axanar Productions bank account. This is the bank account statement. In this month, you can see that a certain amount of money has come in. This is the reason I brought this one up is it's the first month that money came in from Amazon Payments, which is actually from the Kickstarter campaign that raised money, right? Yep. It comes in as a deposit. Now, the money that came into Axanar Productions Florida, $3,000 came in from Axanar Productions California. $6,000 came in from Axanar Productions. That's the second bank account. Then there was 50 grand that came in from Kickstarter as a deposit. These things, all of this Stripe stuff comes in from the Axanar store. And this stuff right here, Axanar Productions, again, sent that amount of money. So we can see how money came into the bank account. 12 grand or so from the other bank account was sent over. 50,000 from Kickstarter, and maybe 600 or so from the Axanar store. Do you have any questions about how money came in, Rob? Because I want to make sure that this is really clear.
Yes. How did it come in, Paul? How did this money come in?
Okay, so let's take a look. This was an online transfer from checking. This was from Amazon Payments, so it came directly into the account. It was wired into the account from Kickstarter, or essentially Amazon Payments. So Kickstarter, the money is raised. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that Kickstarter usually take about 8% of money raised, so they do great. Thanks very much. And and then the rest of the money is sent. But this is just a deposit because the very next month the big money is going to come in, and I'll show that in a little while.
Yep.
And then that's just from the Axanar store. Now, against that, it's easy then to see, and we can do this quite easily, right? If you go down below, you can see some checks that are written, and I'll give you my color coding in a minute. And you can see certain things that things are spent on. So, for example, I'll take this line right here because I keyed this up already. This is $519 that was spent on Facebook. Okay, now it's for Facebook advertising. And when I bring the actual ledger in, this is the ledger that Alec Peters sent to CBS. You can see it says Axanar. It's very small up here, but right up here it says Axanar Master 2014 to 2016, printed from Alec's Finances on 12/10/2016. Okay, so right here, there's that payment to Facebook, right? $519.64 on 9/9/2014. So it's accounted for. There you go, $519.64 on 9/9/2014. It's accounted for in Alec Peters' documentation. Any questions so far? That seems pretty straightforward.
Seems straightforward, pretty reasonable. I
So what I decided to do was to take a look and see if every transaction that was on this bank account was actually accounted for. Because after all, the bulk of the money that's coming in is coming in from Amazon payments. And in a little while, you're going to see a massive check that comes in from Kickstarter.
Now,
So,
to be clear, this Axanar Productions bank account should really only ever be really used for anything Axanar, making Axanar, anything Axanar related. It either should be for the production, purchasing things that we later are going to sell, and that's what it really should only be for. Right?
Yeah, there's no question, right? It's Axanar Productions business account. The only thing that I think would be in question, right, and I'll probably ask your opinion on this. One of the things that I can actually see just by looking at this stuff is that some of the money that was in this account was still being used to pay off Prelude at this time. Right? So this is October of 2014. Prelude had been finished quite some time before, right? But some of the money is actually attributed to Prelude. Now, some people would say, and I don't know the answer to this, right? Some people might say, well, that's not fair. Prelude should have had its own bank account. But I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. I think perhaps if you had $1.3 to $1.5 million and you had a bit of a shortfall on Prelude, which really, frankly, set the table for you to do this, you could almost call it a marketing tool. I don't know if I have that much of a problem with some of the money that's here still taking care of the shortfall on Prelude. But what's your opinion on that?
No, I think you're right about that. So for people to understand, a movie is a business entity unto itself. It usually, when movies are made in Hollywood, there's an LLC set up, and that LLC is used to make the product. And then when they change over that LLC and the studio acquires it, but it's run like a business unto itself. So everything that's involved in a production becomes its own business entity because they have to, and every single penny is accounted for. And when you're working with a studio is looking every day at how much money is being spent, because to make movies you have to borrow money from banks, and it has to be absolutely airtight. And they know, a studio at any one time knows exactly how much money is being spent and where it's going.
Right. So then, what would our expectation be? Well, that money is spent is legit. It's actually spent for the right things. Remember, we just read any number of examples from Alec Peters where he said no money was spent on inappropriate stuff, basically. No donor money went to him. It didn't get spent on stuff that benefited him. So that's his statement, and he's made it plenty of times. I used no donor money, he said, on June 27th, 2018. I used no donor money for anything personal, a fact proven at length. By the way, I would very much dispute that fact has ever been proven at length. But that's his statement, right? That's his contention. So let me go back to the screen again, and we'll take a look at some of the expenses in, say, this first month or the second month that I've got records for, right? And just for the sake of being complete, this is the first month. We can go back to it and look at those if you want to. Essentially, there's money that's paid for Prelude fulfillment. There's money paid to Meadow Properties for rent, according to the ledger. And what you can do, and I'm going to do it right here. We'll do it again. You see Meadow Properties rent, $6,477. So what should happen, if I didn't get this wrong, I know what's wrong though. Hang on, I need a comma in there. There you go, 6,477. You see that? So I can click on it, and it will take me to that entry, and it will show me that it was to Meadows Properties. Okay. So I can look at any of these entries on this bank account, and I can enter them on Alec Peters' detailed records and see whether they have been recorded. Yeah.
Yep.
You're going to have a number of things. My 4 categories. If it's in yellow, then it's spending that was reported. If it's in blue, it's unreported spending, and we'll get to that in a second.
I do want to say, by the way, if anybody's interested, you could use the super chat feature or the tip link and ask us questions.
Please do. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
There's also a link in the description for Paul Jenkins' GoFundMe for his legal defense.
Right. So the orange, I even made up a little thing right here that everyone can look at and make it a little bit easier. The orange stuff is questionable spending, something that I feel you could ask a question about that type of spending. And then, because so famously, there was discussions about whether or not there was too much money spent on restaurants or cars and tires. I put in restaurants in green and cars and tires in pink, right? I'll bring that back up in a little bit, and we will take a look at it. Okay, right. So let's take a look at it then. Here's the first month. Here's the stuff. There's some yellow, and there's plenty of green. The green is all restaurant spending. And I think you can look at the restaurant spending, and you can ask yourself the question, if you invested money into Axanar, were you okay with $72 being spent in Vitello's restaurant here, and the next day $32.25 at Sushi Nan, and then the next day $32.20 at Sushi Nan? In other words, is this money being spent the way that you think it should be spent because you donated money to Axanar?
No.
Okay, well, we'll get there, okay? I think that's the question. Is it? Now, are you expecting that you will pay for gasoline, right? Are you expecting, maybe? I don't know, but I put gasoline and tires and car repair all in the same thing because of the questions that were raised. So we're going to go down, and we're going to get back to the next one because it's just easier to sort of see. I will tell you that one of the electronic, like all of this stuff in blue, is not reported over in the other thing. So we're gonna put that to the test. You ready?
Okay.
This is a loan payment to Toyota right there. TMCC is easily traceable as a loan payment to Toyota, right? And it's for $1,088.06. So 1088.06, and now it's going to go look for it. And as you can see, it doesn't find it immediately, which is what it does when it's in there. Okay, there's no trace of that. There's no TMCC. There's no accounting in this ledger. So it's ended, and it's not found anything. Huh. That payment to Toyota was never accounted for. Now, quick reminder, okay? That money doesn't belong to Alec Peters. It belongs to this production company. And that production company is supposed to be making a fan film. And that money that comes in, if it doesn't come from the other fan production, from the other bank account, which still is the same fan film, then it's coming from Kickstarter, and it's $50,000.
Okay. Wow.
So now, take a look at how much of this is legitimate spending that's been reported, and how much of it is green because it's restaurants, and how much of it goes unreported, and what is it that's not reported. You can look at it from the beginning. $32 in the Apple Store, sure, and I'll try not to bore everybody. $20 on gasoline, and here's a restaurant, $25. Now, I'm going to bring up a point with you, Rob, that should be also considered immediately. If you're going to use money for meals and entertainment on a production, why don't you help me explain to everybody how that would work?
In terms of if
who
well-
are you who are you legitimately allowed to spend money on?
talent. You know,
Right.
if you have an actor, you're gonna talk to them about the project. If you're buying lunch, if there's a working lunch, you know, and but it would always be production related.
Right.
But that's what it would be for. I mean, if you're buying, and that by the way is legitimate. Like if you want to take your talent out to a nice meal or have a conversation or do something. Same is true of like the bigger productions do pay for telephones. You know, a whole production will but again, this is a fan film, you know, and maybe that would be once a week, you know, or something.
Right. And then the question is, you know, is this a bigger production, right? I mean, can it pay for phones? Because we're trying to put all the money up on screen, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a question. I'm not so sure there's an answer to it. Maybe you could justify spending money on phones. Maybe you couldn't. But I do think that the whole point of a film like this should be like Prelude. You've got to put the money up on screen. You've got to make something amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can definitely look at the cost of $25.58 at creation and $12.14 and $25.40 and say, there's no way that was two people. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Right.
But that's not for two people. I would be hard pressed to believe, right, that $31 is for two people. It might be, but at a certain point, when you look at the sheer amount of spending on restaurants, and it gets way worse below, right, and way more, you're going to see that what is essentially happening here is that somebody is using this bank account to basically eat from.
Right.
That's what it looks like. You know, there could be a counter argument to that, but I think that would be a difficult argument to make. And I also feel that anyone who's an Axanar backer has every right to ask the question, do I agree that restaurant plus that one, plus that one, plus that one, in other words, restaurants every day, you know, is that a fair and legitimate expense? Now, the next thing we get to are the blue ones, right? Everything that you see in blue right here was not accounted for. I'm not quite sure. Every time I saw Envision, and I got to just qualify this to be fair, Envision seems like a legit expense, but it's just never listed. It's never cross-referenced over here. So if I put Envision, there's nothing there. It doesn't. So for some reason, whatever that service was, I think it's something to do with marketing. Maybe it just didn't get transferred over, which would then have me asking the question, why not? Because this thing has supposedly been reviewed by the best accountants in the country. Right? So
Yeah.
I find that claim to be a little dubious too. If they're the best accountants in the country, how could they not see a simple transaction not be reported inside these airtight, detailed financials that got submitted to CBS?
And let me ask you something, Paul. If they're submitted to CBS during a lawsuit, and wouldn't that mean that you were supposed to the best of your ability, verify that these are true statements? That these
Absolutely.
are so by submitting untrue statements to CBS, I mean, forgive me, I am not a lawyer, nor do I pretend to be one. But if these are untrue, these were officially submitted during a lawsuit to a major corporation, and if they're not true statements, wouldn't that mean you've committed perjury?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer either, right? I just think the question would remain, like, aren't you supposed to report everything? So if we take a look at these spending, for example, you know, Luxottica is for sunglasses, right? We'll go to the next one. So there's a Delta flight that is not reported. And, you know, the way that we can do it, and, you know, Rob, I'll tell you what.
The thing is, Paul, all the money in this account has been coming from Kickstarter.
That's
so
right.
there's a direct line to Star Trek, people supporting. There's a direct line from people who supported the movies, our fan film project on Kickstarter, to this money.
Yes.
So this money was all brought in on the back of Star Trek, on the promise of, which we don't own. You know, we didn't own. Paramount allowed fan filmmakers to make movies, but we used the promise of making a Star Trek fan film, not a Superman fan film or a James Bond fan film, but a Star Trek fan film. So we have directly promised all of our backers a Star Trek fan film, which means that's Paramount's copyrighted material.
Yes.
So that's why they sued us, not
After
because we
all-
were too good.
Right. That's why they sued him, because ultimately the question was, what are you doing with all this money? Right. Like, you're not in our business. And, there are other stories and problems, the story of maybe going to Netflix and trying to pitch Axanar as a film, right, may not have been a good idea if it didn't belong to you. Right. That's the kind of thing that I think has been a problem. But focusing on the money only, you're right. The question would be, can we find it? I'd like you to do me a favor so we can check the work here. Pick a number, pick any of these numbers right here, and we'll see if we can cross-reference it to Alec Peters' records that he provided to CBS. Pick a number.
$47.
Is there one for dead on $47? Right here. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Rite Aid. So that is right here, and it's to Rite Aid. Right now, if I do this right, I'll type in $47 up here, and it won't show me a payment attributed to Rite Aid. Here you go. I've got two of them. I've got one that is a money that came in from the store, so that's actually a plus in black. And I've got a restaurant that was $47 was spent. So there are two entries for exactly $47. You made my heart leap then, because I hope I hadn't made a mistake. But two entries for $47, and none of them refer to this entry of $47 right here. In other words, that was never reported. I want to give you the little thing right again. If it's unreported, then it's in blue. If it's reported, it's in yellow. So that is something that I spent hours upon hours upon hours going through every single one of these, because in the last couple of weeks, there's been all this arguing about whether or not somebody should have an accountant do this. And, hey, let's pay $20,000 for an accounting. And I'm like, you know what? I'll do it for you, because it's not that hard to add up numbers and compare them to numbers.
Well, and there's
right?
only one, or there's two, but there's only one Axanar Productions bank account.
Well, there are two, unfortunately, but sure, right? Here's what I can do. I can tell you if something is actually attributed to this bank account we're looking at, because it is 6220. So 6220, right, is the number that you see right there. And 6220, I'm just going to kind of bring up, here you go. This, if you can see right here, there's 6220 of the last four digits. So anything that says 6220 on here is something that is being reported to that financial review or that financial document from this bank account. Okay? So it's easy to see. You can take a look for yourself and you can see the stuff that's in green. That's all restaurants. You can see the stuff that in blue, that has not been reported as spending. And I get a question when I look at VSP Vision Care and say, how is that production related? I look at the dentist and I say, how is that production related? And you know what, Rob? Let's go over and above and say, okay, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe somebody needed their teeth being fixed or cleaned because of an expectation. But to be clear, there was no production happening at this time. There was nothing going on. So you'd be hard pressed to say that somebody could actually put that into a ledger and say that's fair. I've got plenty of these. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Melrose Umbrella Company. Does that seem fair? No. Fandango for movie tickets. Does that seem fair? I don't believe so. Netflix, Ralph's, a doctor that does vision stuff, Gelson's Market with a $200 cash back, Meltdown Comics. I cannot see the application of Meltdown Comics and a set of comic books that goes to a movie, unless you can think of something. I mean, you have to start thinking really hard and be very creative to do so, in my opinion.
Well, Paul, I can't answer that because I actually filmed a movie in a comic book store once. So, if we were actually doing that, I could see somebody, paying a comic book store to shoot there, maybe a little location fee. Right. But what is, for me, what's disturbing about this is that this money was only to make Axanar.
Yes.
It was only to make Axanar. That's it. So... Right. I had to work multiple jobs, and look, people that worked on Prelude were paid to work on Prelude. That's why it was a $100,000 budget. People got paid to do the work that they were going to do. Of course, Alec Peters tells people that I was apparently the only person on Prelude that volunteered.
Right.
It just,
Right.
I mean, but so we were going to pay people, and people would say, well, why would you pay people to make a fan film? Well, the thing is, you can't have professionals work on a fan film. People would say, well, it's not a fan film then. And there was a little weirdness there. But the people that were paid were good at their jobs, and we were paying them to do the work. Just like if you wanted to build sets, you don't get wood for free because you're making a fan film. Dean was building sets, so those sets had to be paid for. The wood had to be bought. Dean had to be paid for his time. He couldn't spend his whole life doing these things for free, you know, and that was legitimate. And I want to point that out, that people were supposed to get paid to work on this project, and this money that's going out of the account was not being used to pay people or being used for the production at all.
Right. So if we now go take a look at the electronic withdrawals that come out, this is at the end of it. You know, the other ones were like ATM withdrawal, not ATM, but ATM and debit card withdrawals, right? However, we can take a look at other electronic withdrawals, and I think this is where, you know, you start to look at like what I think is a pattern, right? I'm going to do this one again because I had it in green, and I know that's just because I've done an oversight. So we're going to enter this one, 179.85, right? So all I have to do is to go 179.85 and see if it shows up with anything, right? It doesn't, and it won't. So that is not reported spending. The AT&T right here, that's not reported spending. Now,
Jessica Odell wants to know about the Warhammer shop in the UK.
We're going to get to that in just a little bit, Jessica, I promise you, because that is actually pretty fascinating. Because I think, you know, the question that can be asked is, does that represent a level of hubris for someone who's in charge of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to then begin to say, that's my money to do with as I will, right?
Well, that's, yeah. And 200 Watt Studio asks, why Dodger Stadium?
Yes, there was one entry actually up there a little while ago for Dodger Stadium. I couldn't answer the question. It's up here somewhere. The answer would be that somebody went to Dodger Stadium and they spent the Axanar Productions bank account spent money at Dodger Stadium. And that's pretty simple. Now, here's a question. I put some, you know, arrows in a few things that I wanted to draw attention to. This is the gas company. It seems like a very legitimate expense, right? If you've got a payment to the gas company, it seems very likely to me that you are buying gas services, right? Power services, but it is not listed. And so the question is, whose gas did that pay for? Just below it, there is a $3,000 payment to a Chase card ending in 9038. I can't tell you what that Chase card is, but if that money went out of this bank account to essentially pay off a Chase credit card, then the question would be, where in these financials is a Chase credit card listed for spending against Axanar? And the answer is, I haven't found it.
Interesting.
So, you know, what credit card is this? 9038. Now, this is money to Tobias Richter in Germany, and again, this is for Prelude, or it was certainly listed in these as being for Prelude. I will. I think I can probably.
I think that is absolutely legitimate. I
think it's legit, right? I actually think it's legit because I think it's like I can understand why there's spillover. Here you go. There's $5,000 to.
Yeah, he had to wait to pay off Tobias till he got that money in. Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and I don't think. But then here's a payment, you know, to Jacqueline whomever using PayPal, and that payment is $6,054.05. But there's no description of it in this set of records that was provided.
Wait,
to CBS.
Jacqueline?
Yes.
Jacqueline is a friend of Richard Hatch's that Alec knew.
Okay. Now, she got paid money, but it didn't get put into this ledger.
Wow.
You know, there may be a very legitimate reason why Jacqueline was paid money, but it certainly didn't get put into the ledger that was submitted to CBS.
Wow, but it came out of the Axanar bank account.
But it came out of the Axanar bank account. That means if money was paid to Jacqueline, who's a friend of Richard, maybe there's a very legitimate expense, but it has to be cross-referenced and put into this. It has to be put into this, right? because you're trying to account for the money that you spent. And let's be clear, in my opinion, personally, I believe that money belongs to the Axanar backers.
It does. And every
Right.
dollar that's in the Axanar bank account, every single dollar should be for the production.
Yes,
or so
absolutely.
either or to pay people, anybody who worked on the production or whatever.
Now, these ATM withdrawals are interesting because they're actually attributed to Prelude. So if I put in 2,800 right here, you can find one entry, and it is Axanar Prelude to Axanar, and it says Axanar checking 620, withdrawal $2,800. There's no accounting for what the withdrawal went to. Like, that's $2,800 of cash. And it says that it went to Prelude to Axanar. Sure. And maybe it did. But the question is, how did it go to, who's got that $2,800 worth of cash? Maybe it was a payment to somebody, right? But it just has to be cross-referenced. You don't provide financials that are detailed like this.
Right.
Right? Okay. So, going down, and hopefully people are interested in this because it really just dissects the most thing. Here's the big thing, right? And I'm going to just do it like this, okay? This is the next month, October, and this is where the big money comes in. You can see a payment of $500,034.11, and you can see another for $22,000. That's $522,000 that comes into this bank account. And that money is money that belongs to the backers of this project.
Yeah.
Okay. So we go to checks, and I'm going to get to this one in a bit because this one is bonkers. But here's stuff that's not attributed. Here's stuff that is for rent. And there's some questionable ones that we'll get to in a little bit, Rob, because I think those ones are fascinating. You go down this thing, you ask yourself the question, Schaefer's Garment House. Does that seem fair? No, I don't think so. Arclight Cinemas. I think that's not fair spending. $219 at Becker Tire and Costa Mesa, which is Alec's go-to place, I guess, for his cars. $1,071 on a Delta flight and another $451. None of them are listed in his detailed financials that he sent. So that's $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 that's gone towards Delta flight that is not accounted for. And the crazy reason why I put these in orange was that these were listed. The $59 and the $59 and $68, those were actually listed in this thing. So why not list the actual cost of the flights?
Once again, we have a little Paul. Paul is
All right.
there we go. You're back. Yeah, you're back.
Yes. Okay, so you can ask these questions. Arclight Cinemas, you can ask. I believe personally, and again, in speaking to the bank fraud specialist that I spoke to last night, when you are looking at legitimate expenses, I question the legitimate expense of like GoGo Air for $50 every single time, because there are plenty of those in there. That means that you're basically just using backer money for what? Watching a movie in flight or whatever it is that you're doing with GoGo Air.
Right.
I don't think that's a fair expense. I can see an expense like Vitello's Italian restaurant for $230 and say, that looks like where you took a bunch of people out. I got no problem with that kind of thing. Certainly $230 worth of restaurant had better be for 2 or 3 people. So that seems like a fair expense.
That, and to be fair, it was probably for like a Richard Hatch or a Gary Graham lunch,
Yep.
taking the 2 of them out,
Yep.
because obviously they weren't getting their normal rates to be in the movie. So anytime you're taking care of, one of the benefits of the film Prelude is the level of talent involved, and you want to keep your actors happy. So yeah.
Absolutely. And so I don't think I see any problem with that. Now, Jessica, I think it's Jessica a little while ago, asked the question about the trip to England. So let's get into that. I just want you to think for 1 second about what this actually represents, this page. Because what you have to understand again with the everything in yellow here is been reported in this ledger, right? Everything in yellow has been reported here. Everything in green is a restaurant. Everything in blue is not reported. So, Sirius XM, that's not reported. A $400 ATM withdrawal, that's not reported. Netflix, not reported. And here's where it gets funky, in my opinion. This is for a reservation for a Q Hotels in Leeds. I looked it all up. It's all part of the same thing, basically. This was a trip that Alec Peters took to Nottingham in England to stay at the Belfry, which is a pretty swanky golf hotel, and went to a Warhammer tournament. Now, in the last couple of days, we've been able to find his own postings where he posted from that tournament on these dates. So he went over there and proudly posted pictures of Black Library and so on. You got all of these things right here, ATM withdrawals, stuff bought on Amazon Marketplace. This thing right here, actually, I think is a bit outrageous because this thing's called the Clean Program, and it's kind of a diet thing. That's $500 right there on a diet program. But when you get down a little bit below, you see, same old thing, more diet stuff, Games Workshop, like $76 spent on Warhammer. And I believe the question should be, are these legitimate expenses, right? And if we have to keep going, Rob, back to the one thing that makes them that makes everything kind of come into focus, which is this money came from backers of Axanar. So that expense on Warhammer has to be justified.
Right.
Down below, I'm going to show you, and this is one. I'm actually going to hide for the moment one very important thing, because I think you and I obviously know what's coming up in a little while. But you've got all of these expenses in electronic withdrawals, and I can only justify 3 of them, because those 3 that are justified, they're the only 3 that are actually reported in this ledger. We can take one, okay? Let's take this one, Match.com, which I think is pretty outrageous in my opinion. I think the idea of spending $137.94 on Match.com that came from Axanar backers is very unfair. But I'm going to put the number in, right?
Well, it might have been a good night.
Yeah, maybe. You never know, right? I mean, certainly somebody enjoyed themselves. Okay, so let me just check again. It was $137.94, right? $137.94, nothing comes up. And that's because it was never reported.
Right.
It was not given to CBS, right? It was not reported in the detailed financials that were provided to CBS. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to take this off screen for a second. I'm going to scroll down because you know what's in there, Rob. And then I'm just going to do one more of these so I don't bore everybody. I'm going to do it really, really quickly. But I do think it's worth looking at, right? I'm going to bring it back up again. All of this in blue, all of those deposits, none of them are noted, right? They're not in this financial report. All of this stuff here, there's some yellow stuff. There's a bunch of greens because that's out in restaurants, and there's some blue stuff. At this point, you sort of wonder, is it worth it? Well, here you go, Jessica. Here's the trip to Great Britain. It drew my attention because I saw St. Pancras, and I'm like, well, that's my part of the world. So I took a look, and I took a look at what was on there, and all of a sudden I see Warhammer World. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, to me, I certainly looked at this and said, that doesn't seem fair. I mean, I can see Burning River Toys. I looked them up. They do, figurines and toys, right? Hair Raising Studio is for a haircut. But this spending on a trip to Warhammer, to the home of Warhammer in Nottingham, England, right? Staying at the Belfry, that to me seems a very, very tenuous connection to filmmaking.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it. I certainly look at it, and I would ask the question, if I was an Axanar backer, I'm asking the question, how does that get justified when the sources of income that come into this bank account are from me? more stuff in Nottingham, England. You could go on forever, right? I've done it plenty of times, but I want to draw your attention to one thing that I definitely wasn't a fan of. I will say there's one thing in here that I want to bring up. So let me bring up the screen one more time. First of all, I should point out that this thing, the fraud specialist enlightened me to a particular thing that was happening here. There's another payment to that Chase card. So this is paying off a credit card. But this is an online wire transfer via Hong Kong Bank to a London branch. And it is this person, the beneficiary, BEN right there, is beneficiary. Tat Yung Chung, right? That's in London. And that person is the person who's getting this $10,000, right? Remember, this 10 grand came in from Axanar backers. And it says reference balance due. So that is payment of an outstanding balance for something. And I would say this. I would say I'd like to know what that is for, right? It's okay. That could be maybe for an outstanding balance for this project. But the question
or a prop or a replica, something that he's buying.
Well, okay, bring it up again, then we'll do this last one, okay? Because this is one that I actually checked into. Here is a payment to Profiles in History in Calabasas, California, right? And that payment is for the pattern costume that Alec Peters proudly announced just at that time that he had just purchased for himself. He has displayed that pattern. It's his favorite movie. It's George C. Scott's uniform from the movie, and he's proudly announced that belongs to him. But that pattern costume, which I can attribute because I literally got in touch with them to find out what that purchase was for. They confirmed that it was for that costume on that date. So that costume was paid for, if I'm not mistaken, by the people who backed Axanar. They paid for a prop that has been claimed as a personal prop ever since. You tell me, mate.
I don't know. I mean, Alec claims I stole $81,000 of donor money. I keep saying when he says that, he's always changing. He's like Senator Eisner and the Manchurian Candidate. How many communists are there? There's 28 communists. How many communists? There's 27 communists. I just wish he would bump it up to $100,000 to make me a better thief.
Just make it even, then it's worth doing, isn't it, right?
Yeah, But this is, I mean, it's extraordinary because if you think about it, $10,000 might have paid for shooting the opening Klingon sequence from our script.
Yep.
So each one of these payments, it could have been a scene, it could have been a character, it could have been something that would have gone up on screen in the movie.
Right.
So all of these payments are detracting from the film itself. Right.
I agree with you. And I think, that where everybody should have a question, and I'm going to make this one for you, Rob, okay? Because last time that you and I spoke, and that's on the previous one that we did. The last time that we spoke, you and I examined payments that were made to you for which you were sued, and I had a big problem with it myself. I'm sure I didn't have as big of a problem as you did, right? But I did have a problem with it because I felt that you had been sued, and this had come out from the depositions that we made Alec Peters sit for. You had been sued because the claim was that you had been loaned money, right? And we showed that, in fact, the money that was claimed that you had been loaned was never loaned to you because it was a check written by Axanar Productions or money paid by Axanar Productions to usually Ludovico Technique.
Which is my loan-out company.
Your loan-out company.
Yeah.
So that is not a personal loan.
No.
Right?
And to be fair, I mean, look, when there was a time when I was coming on to work for Axanar full-time, and my rate was $3,000 a month. That's what I was going to get paid to direct the movie, and I was going to get paid that for the entirety of 2016, which is not, I mean, it's not bad money, but basically that was just to live on because I was going to do everything. And before that, I was also doing an incredible amount of work on the project. And when when I was getting money from him, I needed it to live, and I'm like, I'm working, you made $100,000 on the Blu-rays. And I'm a professional. I mean, I get paid a lot of money. I was working for CBS, and I'm making you this Blu-ray that you brought in over $100,000 was brought into the Axanar perks for the Blu-ray that I was making you. So Alec, I've always asked him, how much was I paid for any of the work I did? How much was I paid? You know, and according to him, none. I was like some volunteer. I'm like, why would I possibly volunteer to work on a project for a guy I didn't know before I was introduced to him by Christian Gossett? I didn't know him. You know, and if anyone, I'm the only person who actually delivered. You know, and I didn't have. I was Alex always going, oh, you're one step away from homelessness. I'm like, yeah, because I'm working on your project. I'm not working in the normal, you know, what I normally would get paid, and I'm working for you, and that's the thing that kills me. But yes, there was never official loans made, and I always got paid through my company. For this precise reason.
So I want to take one case study. We're going to take two of them because the big one that we're going to show in a little while is going to, I think, really blow the lid off of this thing, right? But I want to take one that actually, in some ways, I take it personally because I have been sued by this person, and you know, everything that my family and I have endured has been because of things like this. You know, that this is clearly something that deserves investigation, that there are multiple lawsuits, there's bragging, there's yelling across the internet. I've had a week this week. My whole Christmas day was spent logging information on what Alec Peters had just basically said. He said this week that I had been fired by his production for inappropriate behavior towards women. And you and I talked last time about what's called the evolution of a lie. You start with a tiny lie, may not even be tiny, but the lie was that I somehow spoke to Alec Peters' girlfriend, Crystal, and told her to break up with him, which the moment my CEO heard that, she laughed out loud and said, yeah, that didn't happen, because anybody that knows me, and there are thousands of people that know me, said, yeah, Paul, there's no way Paul would have done that. But not only that, I don't care about their relationship. I don't care anything about them. So I met Crystal 2 or 3 times. So no way did I say that. But at a certain point, they said that, and we kind of shrugged and went, that was goofy. What did they say that for? Well, a little while later, they said I made an inappropriate comment. And then they said I behaved inappropriately towards her. Then I was inappropriate with her. And when he lost his temper this last week, he said I was fired for inappropriate behavior towards women in plural, right? So you take a small lie and you turn it into a really big one. Rob, I've seen the lie with you, which I believe to be a lie, is you were loaned money, and it's gone from 20,000 to 30,000 to 50,000 to this, to you stole equipment, to now this week, because he's angry, it's $80,000.
That's why if he keeps just bumping it up. And the thing was, I mean, I was working for him. So like it was money coming in on the project that I was working on. that was and that has been the frustrating thing for me. And since we're on, and Paul will come back in a minute, but since I'd really like, this is the thing that I'm going to state unequivocally here. I've said it a million times. He accused me of stealing all of the electronic assets that I had created. Mm-hmm. I asked him, because there was only one drive, a couple of drives. They were my drives. I brought in my equipment when I started this. While I was working on it, my Mac battery exploded. He replaced my laptop, as he should have, because all of the equipment went through. And that's one of the things that when he replaced my computer, while I was working for him, he said that was equipment I stole. And I'm like, look, man, you owed me for that. So I said to him, and I'm going to say this now because he's accused me of this a million times, as a post-production supervisor and editor myself, making sure that your digital assets are protected is of paramount importance. See what I did there? Paramount importance. What I asked him for, I said, I need you to buy me 2 drives, and I'm going to back everything up that I've created on this project. All of it. I did that. He bought me the drives. I copied over everything for him. Those drives, I used those drives once, packed them up in a box. They existed on the corner of his desk for about 6 months, and then they were on the floor. And And then we moved, we moved out of the studio. He moved to Atlanta, but I told him, I said, you've got to protect these. He accused me of never having done that, of stealing the assets, and he claims that I never did that. And I'm like, I just want to say right now, fuck you, Alec. I did that. Full well.
He did admit to Jonathan Lane in the conversation, which we got, right? He did admit to Jonathan Lane that, in fact, he always had him in his possession. And Jonathan Lane was surprised and went, what? What do you mean you always had him in your possession?
Well, I mean, to have that, of all the things that bothered me, I think that bothered me the most. Because, and he keeps saying, at first I owed him money, then I stole money from donors.
Yeah.
How did I steal money from donors when I was the one that delivered everything? But
well, let me just point, before we get to this next bit, then I just want to point out something that I worked on, and we talked about it last week, and I'm going to bring it out again. Over time, I've learned that there's a script, because I think someone that doesn't say things honestly, if they're saying dishonest things all the time, and they're trying to work out how, logically you could have been the worst human being in the world, you didn't do any work, and you were lazy, and you stole money. And Christian Gossett was also really lazy, and he didn't do any work, and he stole money. And then Paul Jenkins was really lazy, and he didn't do any work, and he stole money. And at that point, it's just a scripted thing that basically says it's the same thing for everyone. Now, I have Troll Hunters logs, which is Alec Peters' private group. And we have those Troll Hunters logs that were actually given to us by somebody else. And they show that he says about Christian, he says, let's tell everybody that Christian was a liar and a thief who stole $5,000 and didn't do the work. That's his mandate, to send his people out publicly to spread propaganda about poor old Christian Gossett, who's like literally directed Prelude. He didn't do anything. Right. You know what he did? He didn't stay with the product. He didn't stay with that project. And when you leave his orbit, this is what happens. So I want to show you something, mate, that was fascinating to me. You and I talked last time about your lawsuit. I want to bring it up on screen again and show you something that I discovered that really blew me away. So hopefully people can see this, but I'm just going to kind of highlight it. This is actually a page from the lawsuit. And what it does, it lists a bunch of stuff that you were paid, and it says it was a loan. Now, you and I went through this last time. Most of these are to Ludovico technique. These are payments made to you for services, through your loan out company and paid by Axanar Productions, this bank account, and we can find it. We have the ledger that shows us these payments. Mm-hmm. However, I found something that I couldn't believe last week. So let's go to this one. I had a real concern. About this particular check, because that check for $10,000 is attributed in the ledger to you. It is a payment that says it was made to you, Rob Burnett, right? Question. Did you ever get a $10,000 check from Alec Peters or Axanar Productions?
Not that I remember.
Right.
And the only thing that $10,000, I'll tell you exactly why this sticks out to me. Because Alec told me that during the production, or during whenever these documents were being made, that he was going to say that he paid me $10,000 to work on the Blu-ray and the DVD. And I said, but you didn't. And he said, and because I could use the money, and he did say that he was going to do that. He was going to claim in his documentation that I was paid $10,000, just so I knew that.
Right. So
I was never.
You had been put. It had been put forward, right? So I can see that it's been attributed to you under corporate, Axanar corporate. Not Axanar feature, which is an expense, but under corporate, that you, according to him, had been paid $10,000 on 10/23/2014. He doesn't actually list the check number, but you can see that according to him, he paid you this $10,000 check on 10/23. With me so far?
Yep.
Okay. Now, we also know from his lawsuit that he's claiming that he paid you $14,250 on March the 5th, but there's no sign of a $10,000 payment right there. Right?
Huh.
So that $14,250, that's for the car, right? That's just pretty much went to the Hyundai that you told me about last time, right?
Yep.
That, okay. So here is here's the check, and you can see I've written this next to it because you'll see in a second. That's the actual check that's written to you for $14,250. Check number 1072. With me?
Yep.
So what's $10,000 to you plus $14,250? Easy to add up, $24,250. However, in the Axanar ledger that he provided to CBS, he lists a $10,000 painting to you on this, a $10,000 check to you there, and he only lists this one as $4,250. That's actually how much it was, $14,000, but he lists it as $4,250. Add those two up, and they become $14,250, which is what he claims he owes you. Well, I have it on the word of at least two people, and I'm not making this accusation, but I have it on the word of two people that I've interviewed for the documentary, that on this date, when he got all the money in, this is right when he got $525,000 in, that he went to purchase the art for silent running. So if you purchase that for 10 grand, and he's written you a check a few months later for $14,250, that's $24,000. In his books, he said that he gave you that check for $10,000, and he only listed $4,250 there. There's $10,000 missing from the books. If I were you, Rob, I would ask the question, how did that happen?
Well, because I clearly stole it. What? That's a very good question. I don't know.
I think any backer should ask themselves this question. If you're being accused and sued in the wrong jurisdiction,
twice. I've been on
the end of a lawsuit now. I'm on the end of it by this person who claims that you were given $14,250 in two payments, one of 10 grand and one of $4,250, where we can see with our own eyes that the $10,000 payment, and then there's a $14,000 payment. There's $10,000 missing from the reporting to his own financial documents that he sent to CBS. And if reports are true that that was the purchase of the silent running painting, then that's a reason to hide it. If it's not the silent running painting, I have every opportunity. I'm sure there's a much better explanation and a much fairer explanation that Alec Peters is perfectly capable of providing by showing everybody the detailed documents of what actually happened with that money. But I will tell you this, missing a one accidentally that represents $10,000 doesn't have a good look to it, in my opinion.
I agree, and that's just one payment. I mean, yes. And we've got a lot of things here.
We're going to go to the last one then, the last big one, and I think it's the most important thing that's really happened in this entire endeavor. As I looked through all of this, there were any number of withdrawals that were really hard for me to see justified. If you bring up the other page right now, we're going to show a section of it. This is October the 1st through October 31st. Now, just to remind people, and we're going to go back up here again a second, this is the month in which there is a payment of $522,000 that comes in from Kickstarter. That is a lot of money, okay?
$500,000 plus.
$500,000 plus, okay? So when you go through this, you look at the spending and you look at it and you ask yourself the question, why is this not reported? Why is 400 not reported there? What happened to this money? It's fair enough to ask the questions about the restaurants. It's fair enough to ask the questions about everything that's not reported. You get down near the end and you usually get the same sort of set of stuff. First of all, you get the electronic withdrawals, right? Now, of all of these electronic withdrawals, right, there were 3 of them, like I showed you earlier, that were actually reported in the Axanar ledger detailed financials that were provided to CBS, right? 3. The rest of them, this AT&T payment, this Toyota auto loan, this is to Jared, who worked for Alec Peters with his company PropWorks, but that money is paid out to Jared. And I don't know, unless you have information, that Jared was working for Axanar at the time.
Jared was kind of doing everything. He was working on Axanar. Yeah.
Maybe he did. Okay, maybe that's fair.
Yeah, Jared's a great guy.
No, Jared's fantastic, really nice guy. Yeah, I'm saying the payment there is not in this ledger. Okay, it has to be. If you're going to pay somebody for working on the project, you have to put it in the financials that you provided to CBS.
Right.
Okay, so you're looking at all of these things, Match.com, all of that, and then I came to this, and I will tell you that I could not believe what I had seen with my own eyes. Down here on 10/24, after getting in $522,000, $475,000 of that money is withdrawn.
Wow.
So I'm going to ask you the question. I'm sure that there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for the withdrawal of $475,000 from the Axanar bank account. I'm sure there's a perfectly good explanation. For this entire time of this debacle of Axanar, the film, into which you've been drawn and I've been drawn and plenty of other people have been drawn, the question has come from anyone that backed this project: what happened to the money? Now, you told me, Rob, that when you got near the end of this thing, and I've heard this from other people, including Dean Newbury and others who were there, the question was, how did we suddenly run out of money? Because you were informed at a certain point that you had, what, $200,000 left, right? So describe for everybody what happened in that regard.
Well, okay. So once we started hiring people, and Christine Sheeks, my good friend who's a casting director, we hired her. We actually started to make the movie. And we had production meetings about what we were going to actually do. And every time we had production meetings, we had less and less money to make the film. So there was no fixed budget. And it was really, really frustrating to be in that position. Mm-hmm. And I never understood. Now, our biggest expense, I mean, obviously Dean was building sets. Dean got paid, Diana got paid, Jared got paid, and I was getting paid. And we were trying to do the project. I mean, Dean busted his ass. He worked with other people too, but he was a one-man band. You know, I mean, he built that beautiful transporter set that Alec cut apart. He built the bridge. I mean, if you ask Dean, they never finished the bridge properly. We had a lot more plans for it. But yeah, so we were the only people there. And then the rent for the warehouse, which, by the way, I want to just point out again, the people I brought in could have put that warehouse on a paying basis and it still would have been there being used as a production facility today.
Stay on target.
Sorry.
But, you know, yeah, I mean, I see plenty in here that are legitimate expenses that are definitely put into this ledger, right? That say, you know, this was for a purchase of gypsum, for example, a big old purchase of gypsum, right?
Yeah.
This is a purchase of lumber. You know, there's plenty of stuff that goes into the manufacture of that bridge. There's plenty of stuff at Home Depot. I got no problem with that, right?
No.
I got no problem whatsoever. But when you take a look at the way money is spent on Match.com, or the way money is spent on things, and especially when you take a look at the lakes of blue that are all the way down this thing, because there's no cross-referencing to the detailed financials that Alec Peters provided to CBS Paramount in the lawsuit, right? That should be the record of what was spent. And then when they complained about the spending on cars and about spending on restaurants, because that was reported. Remember all the stuff that we've seen that wasn't reported? The stuff that was reported, they had a problem with. They had a big problem with it. And so he provided a second set of financials that were essentially 2-page summaries that said, I spent $200,000 on construction, trust me. Right?
Right.
That is not a detailed financial report. You have to show the bank accounts, you have to show the receipts, and you have to show the detailed ledger that shows everything that was cross-referenced from the bank accounts and the receipts to that detailed set of financials. And what's conspicuous by its absence in the report to CBS is that at a certain point, $475,000 was withdrawn from this bank account, and it was never reported to CBS.
Where did it go?
I will leave it to anyone else who wants to draw their own conclusion. But I will tell you this, I wouldn't draw a conclusion. I would instead ask the question, if I was a backer, what happened to that, apart from all the other things that are being seen here, what happened to that $475,000? I believe it would be incumbent upon Alec Peters to show everybody his workings in the margins. Show your calculations, right? If you have these bank accounts, and everybody has a copy of them now, right? Because guess what? You can go right now to stoptoxicfandom.com, stoptoxicfandom.com, and you can go to the bottom of the page or the top of the page, and there is a section that says, for Axanar donors, click here. What you can find there is this detailed set of records to CBS, so that you can look at them yourselves because you paid for it. And you can take a look at the bank accounts from Axanar Productions, Florida, and you can match them up to see what you feel is being done. Don't take my word for it, because I haven't said anything. I think you should give the benefit of the doubt, right, until you absolutely can't do it anymore. I have a hard time giving the benefit of the doubt to $10,000 that's attributed to you, Rob, that goes missing in a transaction. Because to me, that seems very unfair, especially to you.
Well, because I've been sued. I mean, you know, he's claimed that he's literally said now it's I've stolen donor money.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, I mean, he for those of you who don't know, Alec did sue me in Georgia court. It was thrown out, but he did sue me. I've never been to Georgia, and it cost me tens of thousands of dollars to defend myself against baseless charges. And as he said in the deposition to you, Paul, he knew full well, like when you sue somebody, and you pointed out, you're saying that to the best of your ability, to the best of your knowledge, is what you're doing here true and legal, or what you're... So he sued me, and he said, they asked him, your lawyer asked him, why did you sue Rob Burnett if you knew it wasn't the right jurisdiction? And he said, legal tactics.
Which is the worst thing he could have said. If he said that, that probably wasn't the smartest thing to say, because ultimately you're admitting that when you filed this lawsuit, you said it was in the correct jurisdiction. You knew it wasn't in the correct jurisdiction. In other words, that rises to the level of perjury.
It does.
Right?
And it costs me and my family. I mean, I have three ladies in my life that I have to provide for.
Mm-hmm.
And the stress and the amount of service and just that it caused around this house for the better part of 2 years. I'm still paying for it.
Yeah.
And he did it on purpose, specifically to hurt me
Yeah.
for working on his fucking fan film.
And so it was a legal tactic, right? Now, so I look at the sort of, you know, what you have to do is you have to stack up the levels of credibility, right? It's easy to find my credibility. That's pretty easy. I would invite anyone to say, come by my Facebook page where you see people who have maybe reshared or retweeted something that I had said about the GoFundMe.
You'll be back.
I love this. It's great. So right now, you know, I'm in the fight for my life, right? I have spent so much money. I have the GoFundMe up there because I'm essentially facing off against somebody that is taking me apart financially by spending, and this has been verified in the CBS lawsuit. The arbitrator found that he had spent nothing in my lawsuit. There was no evidence that he'd spent a penny. And then you're going to say that I sent somebody to attack him at a convention, which didn't happen, and he has no evidence that happened.
Wait, but Paul, hold on a second. Okay, we're back. The stream froze.
Okay, no worries.
I just want to. There's a few people have been asking some questions.
Okay, let's answer them.
Joe Panora says, I applaud both of you for your courage. You guys are gentlemen and scholars. I have to ask, did Alec really buy BDSM gear with Axanar money?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Okay, so, you know, let me just quickly bring that up. I'm going to tell you why I want to bring this one up, and I think it is an important thing to sort of like highlight here, right? Let me just bring it up. I'll sort of like scroll through this for a second, and you'll see it, right? The reason why I think this is important to highlight is, I've said this before. I think it is pretty abhorrent when people want to try to kink shame somebody. I think that is a pretty horrible thing to do. I think that everybody should be allowed to do whatever they want to do in the privacy of their own home. And everything I've learned about BDSM is a very, very trusting relationship, right? But where I have a problem, right, is if you're going to do what is essentially, your own stuff that you want to do privately, you're going to pay for that in a sort of hedonistic way through the money that other people have given you, right? That does not seem, the sort of glib way of saying it is, I donated a bunch of money to Axanar. I did not have an expectation that you were going to buy yourself BDSM gear with it, right? And the reason I actually brought one thing up here because I almost, here, bring this up on screen for a second, Rob.
There you go.
So here is his day on the 29th of December of 2014. He went to Creature Features in Burbank, which sold like monster memorabilia. That was this really cool place. And a 12-minute drive down to 101 gets you to JT's stockroom, where he spent $196.20 on BDSM bondage gear. And I wouldn't care if it wasn't for the fact that the money that was spent right here was provided to him by Axanar donors. That's what pisses me off, is spending money that belongs to other people on memorabilia. It doesn't really matter what you spend it on. Look at all the spending on ArcLight Cinemas. He spent, 2 days at ArcLight Cinemas having the time of his life. And he spent what looks like about $400. That seems extremely unfair to me because that money doesn't belong to him. But the idea that he would go up to Burbank, buy himself some memorabilia stuff at Creature Features, and then drive, 12 minutes down the road to JT Stockroom and buy some BDSM gear. Yes, he did. And that to me seems somewhat unfair to donors. But again, I'm sure there's a very good explanation for it. So the way that should be explained is for people to ask him. Everyone out there who donated to Axanar should go to our website, which is stoptoxicfandom.com, and go and grab these documents for themselves. And then you can take a look at all of these transactions and ask yourself those questions. And I think that you should be able to ask those questions of the person that you gave this money to.
I think that's a very good idea. One more time, stoptoxicfandom.com. Dean, our own Dean, who built those beautiful sets, says, Dean here. I came to the office and found Rob sleeping in his office on several occasions, but Alex says Rob stole $80,000. Make that make sense. It's so interesting having worked. I mean, I was working on this project for 3 years. I mean, and as I said, you can see also, I should point out that in the description of this show, there's a link to Prelude to Axanar, and then there's a link I made. Alex always saying that it's very funny. We were going to make an Axanar Origins disc that was going to be a behind the scenes, and it was going to go in with we were going to make a multiple disc set of the feature film, and we were going to go into explore the where Axanar came from and do the whole making of and all that. Well, it's hard to do a making of and make that disc when you don't have the movie. And so the work I literally put on those Axanar Origins things, that was everything that was in process for the feature film. Now, the effects weren't entirely finished, but I put everything that I had together. And, I was working with Tobias Richter, and Dean can tell you, I whenever I'd get a new effects sequence in or a shot in, I was overjoyed because I was, making this stuff, and I explained how it got made. So you can see all that. Now, so thank you, Dean. I appreciate that. Sean O'Halloran says, show the scrubbed blog and the blog from the Wayback Machine from December 1st, 2015.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, you're going to have to give me a second then. You're going to have to talk for a second amongst yourself.
Well,
right?
Here I'll go and I'll keep reading.
Yeah, I do know what that is. Yeah, give me a second. I'll bring that up. Yeah,
I don't know what that is, so I'm excited. Steve Tweed says, thanks so much for this, RMB and Paul. You are reading the hard work. Thanks so much. Well, thank you so much. Our friend Some Old Guy in Hawaii sends in a $20 super chat and says, Isn't this enough for local or state or federal authorities to bring fraud charges exclusively of any private lawsuit? I don't know the law, but maybe someone out there does.
Yeah.
I don't know the law either, but...
I don't know the law, but I would say this. I do think that what I would ask people to understand is how hard this has been, right? It has been incredibly difficult for me. I've gone through all of this money. I've had to, pay out so much money to defend myself from somebody that I consider myself to be evil. I think that this person has done so much damage and has hurt so many different people. And I think it is wrong that we allow these people to do this to us. I really do. I think it's time to stop. And I've taken a stand, and I'm really essentially taking a stand on behalf of quite a lot of people. And I think my belief is that this is going to be in a courtroom at a certain point. Now, remember, all of that stuff we just talked about tonight, that's going to be in a courtroom too. And it's going to be in front of a judge. And a judge is an officer of the court. So that judge can sit there and decide whether this, and let me tell you, plenty of other evidence that we've uncovered is actually rise to the level of criminal behavior. If it does, then the judge will act upon it. And if the judge doesn't believe so, then the judge won't. But that is really a question for the judge, isn't it?
It's a question for the judge. Now, on that, Chairman Meow sends in a $25 super chat, says, my thought is that he transferred the $475,000 to the second bank account. But would that have shown up as a withdrawal? A withdrawal sounds like he asked the bank for $475K.
So in speaking with the person that I spoke to last night, right, in speaking with them, it was clear that that did not happen because there are transfers from that other bank account. In other words, you want to put it in that bank account, just transfer it in, right? You don't need to withdraw it in any way. There's a specific thing, because the person that I spoke to is sort of like a forensic accountant / fraud investigator. There's a specific thing that you can tell from these. So, for example, if you recall, I told you about the HSBC transfer that shows the beneficiary and it shows like what this was for, and the reference was for an outstanding balance, right? So $10,000 was paid for an outstanding balance to this person because the bank records at least show you that. The way that this bank record is shown, right, there's really only one way that could have happened to make a withdrawal. You had to go into a branch and get a bank check. You certainly weren't going to be given $475,000 worth of cash, right?
Right.
So you had to go into a branch and make that withdrawal. There's only one way you can do it, which is a bank check, right? A cashier's check.
Right.
So that's a withdrawal. Now, if it went to the other account, the question would be, well, why was it not just transferred to the other?
Oops. Paul will be back.
It certainly wasn't, but maybe it later was. And that's fine because it's up to Alec Peters to show everybody what actually happened to that $475,000.
Yeah, I don't know. I really had no I had no connection to the money. I didn't know what Alec did with it wasn't, I probably should have required that we put the money away. And I know it was a frustration with other people, not just Dean and not just myself, but people that started to come onto the project that were going to have to be responsible. Like we were moving into production and I was starting to cast this movie. There was people. So before we were sued, Paramount, I guess it's Paramount Global now. Before we were sued, we were ramping up to get into production, and something would have happened. We weren't going to have money to actually make the movie. I don't know where that all came from. Maybe getting sued was a blessing for Alec because, then for a year nothing happened. So, again, I don't know. I mean, it was a damn shame because I think ultimately we wouldn't have been able to make this. And what's so strange to me is I keep going back to Prelude, and I think, soup to nuts from March to July, we raised the money, we shot the movie, and finished the movie. you know, and that's what should have happened with this, and it didn't. And that will, and I was involved with this project for 3.5 years, and I gave it my best shot. I stuck with this through thick and thin at great personal expense. I destroyed my relationship. I had a great working relationship with CBS. I worked for them. Actually, my documentaries were just released on the Picard set that came out and re-released. And I had I destroyed my working relationship with CBS Home Entertainment because of this. Because but if we had finished this and it had come out, everybody loved Prelude. My boss from CBS was at the premiere of Prelude. The guy who gave me the job and I worked for 3 years, and he was like, that was great. Who knows? Because work begets work in Hollywood. And this is the frustrating thing about being involved, as you know, in this whole project. If we had managed to finish it, if you had managed to finish it, if I had managed, who knows where it would have led? Yeah. I mean, before we were sued, everybody loved Prelude. Everybody was on our side. And we could have, even if we just finished the half an hour, as I suggested back in February of 2017, if Alec had just said, you're right, let's just go do it. Let's get it done. Let's get off our table. We're ready to go. You've got the script. We can go make this movie. This would have been put behind us. It's now 6 years later. I've been through three different legal things with Alec. You've been sued. Hundreds of thousands of dollars have been burnt up in legal expenses, and there's nothing to show for it.
Right. Well, I did find the thing that Sean O'Halloran had asked for, so I want to kind of show you this. This actually pertains to the silent running painting. This is the entry that you can find. I believe it's back to very close to the time of 2015. If you look on the Axanar blog post right now from 2015, you find this. There's Alec Peters is basically talking about his stuff that's going on that day. First day of production clappers, such and such. All these things he's talking about. He sold these production clappers. They basically, everybody had signed them, and then they sold them. They raised $1,500 each on the Indiegogo thing, right?
Yep.
I'm meeting with a big shot, a top media production company today. He's a donor and helped us significantly with Prelude. Working from home today since that meeting was in Burbank, and I got a lot of stuff done. Well, that's what's on right now when you go to the Axanar website. That's actually the way that it reads right now. However, that's not what it read when it was originally posted.
Really?
That message has been edited from what was originally posted, although unfortunately for some, it is possible to use the Wayback Machine to go back and take a look at what was originally posted. You see, below that was written, while it isn't Axanar related, we're all geeks here, so here's my latest acquisition, the original poster art to Silent Running. Outside of the Garth of Izar costume, this original art is the single greatest item in my collection and a holy grail. So, in 2015, Alec Peters was very happy for everybody to know that he had the Silent Running original poster art and that he had purchased it on that day, or just before this thing was written. And since that time, he has changed his mind and edited it to remove that reference. Now, I'll leave it to you to infer your own reason as to why that would be removed or why that blog post would be edited. But certainly the question that I've been asked about that silent running painting and whether or not, where it came from and how it was paid for, I think that would certainly explain perhaps some of the reluctance to claim, the provenance of it in a blog post.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, Paul. JM says, do you know if Alec Peters ever considered buying a new personality with donor funds? The funny thing about Alec is he can actually be quite charming. I really did. I had a lot of fun with Alec. It's so weird to me to think where we're at now from where we came from, because his enthusiasm for this project was incredibly infectious. And you know, when you live down the street from my office, that was another thing. I was working out of a great office and did all of Prelude in an office on my own equipment with all my stuff, and so I was providing all that to the production. But we would have a really good time, and because that's what I was focused on, and what I didn't really understand this, and I've come to understand this. When you're working in movies or any creative endeavor, there are the people that love the creativity.
Right.
It's not about the accolades, it's the actual act of doing it. I mean, making movies is, to me, the process of it.
That's
I mean, reward.
It's my equation, right? I want to make stuff. I love making stuff.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. It's what I live for. The idea that you would get $1.5 million in the bank and get to be able to make a Star Trek fan film with that set, I'd be like, let us go, man. Let's go do this thing. This is going to be great. The idea that you would then take that money and maybe do a $10,000 ATM withdrawal that you can't explain, or go down and spend it on some comics or something like that. That to me just seems such a betrayal of what I really want to do, which is go make something. This could have been fantastic. Let's go make a film, right? Look at all the happy people.
And here's the thing. Again, work begets work. And what could the finished movie? Where might it have led? Yeah. Now, it was funny because you couldn't profit off the movie. You're just going to put it out on the internet and let people watch it. But if the movie was good, like for me personally, having another feature film that I directed, nobody cares that it was a fan film. They're going to watch the movie, and if they like the movie, then maybe they'll see me as somebody who can direct. Right. And I was in charge of pretty much everything. I was having the best time ever. I was pre-directing all the effect sequences with Tobias because it was my thought, in order to keep the budget down, if you had the effect sequences, you could be shooting it so you could build, you knew where you were coming into and out of, and you could actually do camera work that would continue on in the effect sequence. It would have been great, and that's the thing that frustrates me the most about this. So let me ask you this. You've been in a protracted legal battle that you're still raising money for, and as I said, if you want to contribute to Paul's legal defense fund, the link is in the description below. You can go to the GoFundMe campaign. What are the next steps for you, and what is happening now on and where you're at?
So I'll tell you, it's been an interesting couple of weeks because I had spent essentially 3 years saying nothing about this. I certainly spent 3 years that have sort of aged me by 10, I think, it's been tough. I'm very disappointed. The way that I tend to conduct myself and the way that I see the world, I don't think, you're not particularly going to make me angry, but you're going to make me kind of heartbroken, or disappointed, right? I'm heartbroken that people can be cruel. I'm heartbroken that something that's so wonderful like Star Trek that people love, fandom that people love, things that bring us together, is being used as a tool to tear people apart, right? So I remember speaking to one of the Axanar supporters early on in this when I first got sued and I started talking to the people over at Axa Monitor, for example, and saying to them, what's sad is that there's so many people that love Star Trek or used to, that now absolutely loathe Star Trek because of this thing that just turned into a goblin, So where do I stand right now? This last couple of weeks has been full of some pretty difficult stuff for me, I would say. Alec Peters has decided to escalate his attacks on me personally by saying a few things, and I think this is up to the viewer. I suppose this will be up to the viewer because you've been watching us now for just over 2 hours, right? One of his contentions is that I am out of control, that I am basically a rabid badger, right? That I've lost it, that this way that you and I spoke last time, was evidence of me raging, because I think from his perspective, anything that contradicts what he sees the world as or what he wants it to be means it has to be discredited. So I watched for 2 weeks everybody it wasn't even just me, it was me, Mike Borden, you know, and I can go through the same old tired kind of things that discredit you, Rob. You were almost homeless, you know. Did you know that you were almost homeless? Well, why I have issue with that is, who cares if someone's almost homeless anyway? You're going to use that as a disparagement against somebody. I saved Rob from being homeless because he's like, discredit him a little bit that he might be a homeless guy. It's bullshit. Okay?
Well, yeah. I mean, and he never talks about all the work I did for him and all the live streams and all.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's all gone away, right? The fact is, you're not with him. And so what I learned a long time ago was that once you leave his orbit, especially the way that we left it, you know, because ultimately, you know, I had called him out for about the 5th or 6th time, like, you cannot do this anymore. You can't behave like this, right? I'd found out about the troll hunters and I'd had to go and admonish him to the troll hunters. I found out about this. I found out about that, right? I couldn't take it anymore. So I sent him the first email I ever sent him with a couple of F-bombs in it, right? Now you're working, right? What are you doing? You're trying to get stuff done. He does something really, frankly, pretty stupid, in my opinion. And he sort of went around the producer to try to work out if he could get a trip to LA to do this and organize it himself. And Scott was like, look, if you want to do this without Meta, just tell us, man. We'll just move on. And so then he sort of did this thing, and I said, for fuck's sake, man. I just was really annoyed. And so I sent these F-bombs in this email, and it just pissed him off. He's, you know, this guy, you can't do that. And so he waited about a month, and then he made up a bunch of stuff that never happened and said, you didn't do any work. I'm firing you for insubordination because you have to be the big, you're insubordination. I'm your boss. You're not my, you know, and all that stuff. And I'm like, look, you know, we won't let the door hit us on the way out, right? We're out. We were relieved in some ways. But when he started disparaging me publicly and then kept using my likeness on his website, that's when we had a problem. So right now it goes all the way around in a circle. He sued me. I didn't sue him. I countersued him. And some of the craziness that's been coming out in the last week is painful, right? He's been saying, for example, that all of this stuff that we showed tonight and any financial stuff is not admissible in court. It's not admissible because this is a copyright case. Well, mate, let me remind you that you sued me for defamation and it took you 13 months to sue me for copyright fraud, right? This was a defamation case. He tried to sue me for slander and libel. So, you know, it is absolutely relevant. The claim is that we make, right, is that you know, didn't show transparency and integrity, right? And I think these bank accounts and things like them would be evidence of whether or not you did. I'm not going to make the judge's mind or the jury's mind up for them. We can take a look at your behavior and these numbers and see whether or not that rises to level of integrity. So right now, because of this situation, we just filed a motion for sanctions because of all the discovery misconduct. We filed a big motion for sanctions. He's crowing, for example, and this is just so untrue, it's just so demonstrably untrue, that we filed 5 motions for records and discovery. We didn't file motions for records and discovery. You're supposed to
He'll be back. He'll come back.
I knew that would happen.
Yeah,
when I started ranting and behaving like I was.
No. So keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, you don't. You know, it's not 5 motions for requests for things that the judge denied that you would send us. You've just never sent us any discovery materials. You don't, you know, there's some, but you didn't send us all the stuff that's behind. So the idea that you would turn that and say the judge denied us that discovery, that's not what happened. You just haven't provided discovery as you usually do in the lawsuits that you're in. You don't provide discovery. So we're fighting this really difficult uphill battle. And my opinion remains the same. If I can get this guy into a court of law for the first time that he will be standing for a protracted period in a court of law because he questioned that I could say he's never been in a court of law when he's been in one. Okay, technically you've been in one, but you've never been in a trial. No one's ever held you accountable like I'm holding you. I'm holding this guy accountable on behalf of all the people that he's hurt and all the people he's threatening to hurt. Rob, he's already told you, he's already told Dean that he's going to sue you again. He told you he was going to sue you if you dared to appeal his attack on the using a DMCA takedown.
Yeah, he did. On the last stream that we did, he took, and he's done that before. And so for those of you who don't know, if you are presenting copywritten material that's owned by somebody else and you're monetizing it or whatever, you can get a strike against your channel because so they have a legal proceeding. If that strike occurs, they're opening up an actual legal case. And by me, what Alec said this, he said, if you protest this, if I appeal it, he's going to sue me in federal court.
Now, can you imagine the hubris, and especially can you imagine actually the sort of thought process of something like that? So what happens is someone does a DMCA takedown on a video that you put up, and you do not agree with that DMCA takedown. I don't agree with it. It's not stuff that is copyrighted because it's not copyrighted, right? All of this is fair for you and I to comment on, which is exactly what we did last time.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a DMCA takedown against you. He did a DMCA takedown, and I think this is really telling. He did a DMCA takedown on the video that Dean Newbury had put up in the GoFundMe. That is clearly trying to make sure that people don't see evidence of what he has done.
Well, yes, no, and that's what he did was the video that began the last stream, and hopefully what ends up happening is then the onus is on him to prove his copyright. And if he can't prove his copyright, if he isn't going to court, then they will put back the stream, the offending stream. But he can't because there's Star Trek material in what he claimed. So if he's got to prove that, and all by already doing that takedown, he's claimed again, legally claimed that he owns some of Star Trek, and he, for a guy who says he's a lawyer, it's the same reason that CBS sued him in the first place. But whatever. So so what else has happened for you? So where does that leave you?
So I spent all of Christmas Day, all of Boxing Day, which is my favorite day of the year because I get to watch my football team play in England, right? And I just wanted to watch Palace play. And I spent the whole day cataloging all of his stuff. And then I had to go in touch with my attorney and talk about all the things that have been going on. Now, the next thing that happened, and I just think this is, for anybody out there, I sort of like want you to understand something maybe. This is not my world, man. I've spent my life working professionally in this business for 35 odd years, right? Since 1988, I started working with Ninja Turtles when I was a kid, right? So, I don't live in this stuff, especially this kind of really vile, cruel kind of, it's just such a level of cruelty that I can't stand. It's awful to watch, right? Because I've conducted myself a particular way my entire career, making sure that I was kind to fans, making sure that I was accessible to fans, making sure that people treated each other well, making sure that we especially stood up for creators. From the very beginning of my career, I was taught how to do that, right? And I wrote this in my introduction to the GoFundMe. I sort of said, look, I was lucky enough, right, that I edited like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. I mentioned this last time when we were talking. And we founded the Creators Bill of Rights. This is about like creators who are fantastic. The whole lifeblood of content is not the content. It's the creators that made it, right? So the fact that you and I come under attack by people, and it's happening more and more and more. So this is what happened a couple of days ago. He decides to tell everybody that he's been speaking to his head of security and also his assistant head of security. Now, how much fucking security do you need to make a fan film? The head of security and the assistant head of security? Is it Fort Knox over there where you've got this thing stored in a warehouse? Okay. So he had a conversation with them, and they informed him that I was out of control and dangerous, and there was a possibility that I might come at him with a knife so that he would arm himself, so that if he ran into me in a convention, first of all, he's a master of Kung Fu, according to him, right? So he's a big I grew up in the martial arts, right? Okay. So, sure, Jan, right? So apart from that, right? You're basically saying now overtly that you're reserving the right to carry a weapon because I'm out of control and raging and dangerous and desperate. There is not a single person in the world who has ever met me that would ever categorize me in any of those ways because they know me, right? There's no raging. my wife gets pissed off because I don't do anger. I believe that anger is a choice that you make, and I try not to make. I think it's a choice that affects change, right?
Hey, to be fair, he wanted to fight all of us fat fucks, and I agreed to go 10 rounds in the ring with him, and to finish whatever I'd said, whatever footage you have for these 2 short films, give it to me. I'll finish it for you, and he didn't take me up on either.
The way everyone knows anyway, the way that any kind of physical altercation ends up happening anyway is that it plays out the way that it plays out, right? You know, like in other words, if 2 people get in a fight, one person usually pounds the other one, or it ends in a stalemate. Anyone that's telling you that they're a master of kung fu and that they're going to kill you and they're carrying a gun, you're like, what are you afraid of, man?
Right.
It's obvious, right? It is a compensatory kind of like comment to make. It's the same when someone says they're an alpha male, right? And he says that famously plenty of times. I'm an alpha male. And all the guys standing around, like I said to you last time we were talking, all the guys standing around when someone says he's an alpha male, everyone's like, that guy's not the alpha male. Like, we all know, right? So the idea that he would now come out and now say about me, of all people, right, that I am desperate and could attack him at a convention, so he's going to be packing. Mate, when you do stupid shit like that, you know what that is? That is Henry VIII saying, who will rid me of this troublesome priest? And it's not the first time that he's done it. Who's going to rid me of the Paul Jenkins problem is literally the overt thing that he's trying to say across the internet. Now look at me, right? I'm supposed to earn a living. I got to write a screenplay right now I'm in the middle of. I'm supposed to do all this stuff. And instead of working, half the time I'm farting around after this stuff. And it's the bills are mounting up. We've spent so much money. And so all I'm trying to say to people is, help me get this guy in a courtroom so that he can do all of that stuff in front of a judge and a jury and explain all of the stuff that you saw tonight. What you saw tonight was a bunch of records that have taken me a lot of time and a lot of effort to collate and to understand and to find. All of the work that we're doing with the documentary to document this has taken tons and tons and tons of time. It's really hard to do. All I would ask people to understand is, if I don't get him in a court of law at this point, then who's going to get him in a court of law? And you know what will happen if I don't get him in a court of law at this point? He's going to be so emboldened that all the people that he's threatening to sue are now going to have to start quaking in their boots. So don't breathe out, because if I don't get him in a court of law, he's coming for the next set of people that he's threatened to sue.
Well,
and I don't want that to happen.
And it's interesting too, like the thing when he sued me in Georgia, even though it was the wrong jurisdiction, if I did nothing, he would have had a judgment against me.
That's right.
Crazy. He would have, and this is how he counts on this, because once he has a judgment against you, you owe him money, rightly or wrongly. So by suing people, he forces you to get a judgment. I mean, in order to defend yourself, because he didn't think I could do it. So he weaponized the legal system against me. He even said he thought I wasn't going to be able to come up with the defense. He was saying things like, I called my mother to get money. And if you know, that's another funny thing. If you know my mother wouldn't give me $5 to see a movie when I was in high school if I didn't have any money. My mom would never. This was silly. So that's what he wanted. That's what he was counting on. And he was gloating about it before it happened, thinking he was going to get a judgment against me. And to see him in a deposition, the way, and I've got the video, to admit that he knew that he was suing me and it was just a legal tactic. Yep. I mean, this is somebody who needs to be stopped because this person has been weaponizing the legal system with his rudimentary knowledge of law. I mean, claiming he's a lawyer, even though he did pass the bar, but he's never practiced law ever. The fact that he's done this to people, just in the time that I've known him, the way he victimized Jared, the way he victimized Dean, the way he victimized you, the way he victimized me. I was doing a Designing Hollywood interview, and I realized that I was talking to Jason DeBoard, who was running his own big auction back in mid-December at an auction house. I'm like, oh, you're the guy who got a judgment against Alec Peters. And I'm like, I'm in my own, it's just unbelievable that this is continuing to happen.
In the depositions, when we brought up that incident, he claimed that he didn't remember that person. It was a blogger of some kind. Now, he'd just spoken about him online, but suddenly in the deposition, it was some guy. I can't remember his name. I don't know what his name was. It was such a long time ago. Listen, man, a month ago, you were like yelling and screaming about Jason DeBoard and how his judgment went nowhere and it didn't mean anything, right? And now you can't remember his name. In his deposition, in the first of 2 depositions, he said, I don't remember, or I can't recall, or I don't know, 176 times. I counted them. 176 times. So I think what people need to understand is if you have this like dangerous type of language, especially if you have that dangerous type of language where someone's saying, hey, my 2 security heads of my fan film have told me that I should be packing so that if it doesn't go well with Paul Jenkins in some environment or something, he even said, I don't want to use my martial arts. I'd rather just pull out my gun and say enough is enough. Who the fuck, Rob, talks like that and yells that kind of stuff across the internet? That's the stuff that is stupid. It's calling people to arms. He knows he's got a group of people that listen to everything he says. And if one of them, just one of them, takes it upon themselves to defend his honor or his girlfriend's honor, and she's just as bad as he is, she does the same stuff. She says the same type of things. She said, I'm going to give you an example, right? She asked questions across the internet. Well, why did Paul Jenkins lie about hiring a particular actress that we hired for because he already knew her, right? And so I thought, well, I'll give you the answer on this live stream. So the answer was, well, I knew her and no one ever said that I didn't. And I said, let's get her in to read for this part. She seems like she'd be really good for the role. She came in, she read for the role, and that was the end of that, right? Simple. And even though I gave that answer, which is the answer, in other words, yeah, I knew her. So that thing you said about not knowing her before we cast her was wrong. Casting is so important in filmmaking, right? So we cast her and we put her in the role. And even though I said it, she just ignored that and then went off and said, you didn't even address it. You didn't. She said that she claimed that I had told her to break up with Alec under oath, and that's what makes it true. And I've never said it. Yeah, the reason I've never said it under oath is I've not been put under oath because you've never deposed me. I wonder why you never deposed me.
Now, that brings up kind of a, so we can conclude all this. Where is it with, I mean, Alec, CBS is now coming after Alec and has gone to a judge to reinforce this. He's broken the settlement agreement with CBS. CBS wants $300,000 plus how much interest every day since September or something?
$85 a day or something, yeah.
So the $85, but it's been months for that. So and that has gotten postponed. So until February, I think, the beginning of February. So maybe Alec's going to be flying out here for that. So he's got a $300,000 judgment that CBS is looking to enforce on him right now. That they don't have to prove it. It's already been proven. Isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah, no, it's an arbitrator who decided that. So it's already been through arbitration. It's not like there was some like additional like lawsuit. He tried to countersue CBS for his so-called expenses in the case against me because he said him suing me was their fault. And as we mentioned last time, the arbitrator, their job is to arbitrate in media, I suppose, stated that he could provide no evidence that he'd spent a single penny in my case because he hadn't. That's literally what they said.
Right. So he's also writing his own briefs, maybe. We don't know for sure, but maybe he's writing his own. Oh, okay, we do.
We put it in our motion for sanctions, right? That this is the unauthorized practice of law, and providing substandard stuff and stuff that is not, written correctly, formatted correctly on behalf of their, when his attorney does it on behalf of their client, right? When they're going to do that, put their name on it, and then not provide the stuff, and not, the amount of times that they've not provided discovery. Hey, listen, they're as culpable in my eyes as he is. And
Now,
so when
where are you at with your own legal actions between? So we're raising money again. The link is in the description. If you want to find the documents that Paul talked about, stoptoxicfandom.com is where you can get the bank records and make up your own mind, or the Indiegogo campaign to help Paul get.
No, it's a GoFundMe. It's a GoFundMe.
Oh, pardon me. The GoFundMe campaign. The link is in the description, and that's literally going very transparently going to pay your legal bills.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. So one of the claims that they made was that I had somehow stated that I could do whatever I wanted with that money. By the way, that's actually true according to the way that it goes with GoFundMe. It doesn't make any difference. I've taken that money that I've received so far from GoFundMe and I've paid my attorney. And so he's like, great, this is fantastic news. We are able to sort of move forward and get this thing through the way it's supposed to. So everything that I've received so far has been sent to my attorney. And that's just the way it is. Like it or not, that's the way it is. So they can complain, which they will, and they'll speculate, which they will, and say, it went here and it went there. Now, as you know, we've said this so many times, the accusation of a narcissist is always a confession. So you're going to call into question my use of money that gets sent to me. You, of all people, are going to call into question what I'm doing with the money that was sent to me. I think the examination of the bank accounts tonight might tell a different story to everybody. Don't you think, Rob?
I think so, Paul. I think absolutely. And that's why, I, for one, I'm tired of being called a thief. When I was working for a guy on his project for 3.5 years. 3.5 years, it's not the money, it's the time. It's putting all that time in that amounted to nothing. I'm proud of Prelude. I'm proud of the work we did there. I'm proud of some of but it just for 3.5 years. And it's not just 3.5 years. The last thing that came out of Axanar that was finished was the VULCAN scene in July of 2015.
Yeah, that's crazy.
9 years ago. And here we are.
Yeah.
So what about your lawsuit, and where are you at? Are you going to get Alec Peters into a courtroom, and if so, when?
We are expected to. We need to make our number, right? And then we need to beat it, right? We need to get above that number, and we need to keep going. Understand that the challenge is this, right? That him flipping out and doing this crazy stuff in the last few days means I've got to get in touch with my attorney and look at the stuff that he's been doing. It's incredibly defamatory, right? We got to go take a look and see what we're going to do about all of this stuff. Do we add to it? I don't know. But it means that I've got to now go to my attorney and try to work out what to do. And he knows it. This is why he does all this crazy stuff, right? Just messing around. But I will tell you this, we've got the motion for sanctions in. We are hopeful that it will hit its point and that something will mean something because of that motion. I think if at this point the judge and the special master haven't looked at it at this point, then, I sort of throw my hands up in despair and say, when you're going to look at anything, please do. It'd be really helpful because what is it that I want? I want to get him in a courtroom. What is it that he wants? He doesn't want to get in a courtroom. What does that tell you?
Well, he doesn't want the truth coming out.
Right.
And the truth needs to come out because, the victimization for you, the victimization for me, for Tiana Armstrong, for Jared, for Dean. It all must end. And over a fan film.
Yeah.
But it's just finish the movie. That's what I don't understand. We made Prelude. We shot it in 3 days, mostly 2 days, and then a couple of pickups for VFX, and we did it. And then we raised the money, finished it, and released it within the space of 5 months. Prelude was made 10 years ago. The lawsuit with CBS, they let him make his 2 15-minute shorts in February of 2017. It's been 6 years, and he has not been able to complete 2 15-minute shorts.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that's probably the most ridiculous thing of all.
Right.
The way he's still, and has been dangling this carrot. I don't care if those 2 shorts turn out to be Gone with the fucking Wind, which, by the way, was made sooner than 6 years. So, it's like the level of supreme incompetence here, and how he hasn't been able to complete these projects, and would rather victimize people in the courts.
You know, Rob, we should put these. One of the things I did last week, and I think maybe I'm kind of loath to do this because, but I was sort of like, look, you know, maybe it'll prove a point, but it won't prove at any point to the other people, right? Okay, I had a lot of questions put to me by his girlfriend. She wanted to put questions to me, so I answered those questions, right? And the answers were easy. They weren't difficult to give, right? They you know, you're going to ask me this, you know, why did you file a false copyright? And the answer is, I didn't, did I? Okay, so you can take a look at it. You know, they've said forever that the copyright that I filed, you know, was for claiming ownership of the entire script. That's not what happened, right? So it doesn't really matter. Reality is optional. But I think that it's fair to ask a few questions of these people. A question, you know, that you could ask is, you know, if you stole $80,000 from Axanar, right? How'd you do that? How did you steal $80,000? Because it's not like you ran out with a mask on with, you know, a big bag of swag and with a dollar sign on it, right? So what's the point of saying that you now stole 80 grand? The idea is it's pissing everybody off. It's making his acolytes and people, you know, sort of angry at you, basically.
Right.
And I think, you know, essentially when you look at all of this, he says, for example, that you didn't finish the Origins DVD, right? But it's he was lazy. Rob didn't do the work. He got paid. He stole money. He did. Well, it's the same thing he said about Christian. He actually said it about me. And then we called him out and said, tell me what Paul Jenkins stole. And he had to like backtrack because, of course, I didn't have any opportunity to steal anything, right? And so in the end, if you look at it, he gave you $5 grand to make that Origins thing, which you couldn't make, just like I couldn't do.
But he actually didn't. He thinks he gave me that money, but he actually didn't.
Maybe he didn't. The point is, even if he did, it was like $5 grand, right? So where did that become $80,000? It is impossible to understand. Like, and so you want to put these questions back to him and say, why don't you answer a few questions for a change? You know, how will you just lay out that Rob Burnett, instead of yelling and screaming, why don't you show us your workings in the margin? Show us your workings in the margin for these bank accounts. Show us how you managed to come up with all of these numbers that you didn't report. Tell us how the ones that are in blue on my document, tell us how they're blue. Why did you not report them? How could you not report a withdrawal of $475,000 from that? How could you not report it when you reported your detailed financials? You know, how would Fraser and Dieter not be able to spot a shortfall of $10,000 that where one of your checks was accidentally listed as $4,250, Rob? How'd they not spot that? And the answer might be that they weren't given the information to spot in the first place. So show us your workings is the answer, right? I want him to show the people that gave him money in good faith. I want him to show them why he deserved to have that money and what he did with it. Because anything other than a full accounting at this point, now that everybody can see these accounts, and he can go download them too because he's already in possession of them. Right. Anybody can go see them, and then they can match them up and do what I did and ask the question, why is this not reported in your own detailed accounts that you gave to CBS?
I think that's a very great question to ask. I mean, right. I'm sorry that we've all had to go through this. I'm particularly sorry that you've been putting up with this for such a long period of time and you've been sort of carrying this torch all by yourself. I mean, that's one of the things I wanted to make this clear and do these streams with you so we could get the word out. And I too, because it never ends. The victimization just never ends. It goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And you never know when he's going to use the legal system, weaponize the legal system against you. Like last week, threatening to sue me if I defended my own YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's crazy. What you're supposed to do, have a strike on your YouTube channel because he threatens to sue you. You know, you want to look at this, and I think that there's probably one person I think that deserves to get a shout out, right? what I've managed to do tonight is, after a lot of really hard work in an investigative reporting, in a sense, I've been able to come up with a bunch of stuff, that is, I'm able to show people who invested their money into Axanar what happened to some of their money, right? That seems fair. It seems fair that people should know, because they have not known this entire time. I want to shout out to one person that I think deserves a little bit of credit in all this, which is Carlos Pedraza, right? Carlos Pedraza, the reporter, has been working on this thing and reporting. And if it were not for all of the work that Carlos had done, I would never have been able to go down some of these roads and actually, A, defend myself legally properly, and B, get all of this crazy material that I've got. And trust me, you see what you see tonight, that's one of 10. It's one of 20 that I've got for the documentary.
Yeah.
This story is the most fascinating and amazing story, but it doesn't matter. It won't matter unless this person is stopped, and he's only going to be stopped if I can get him into a court of law. And that's why I'm asking people to help. You got to help. You can't ask me to constantly take it by myself. I've taken it so far, and we need to get over that last thing. And I'm just sort of appealing to people to say, don't you want the answer to all of these things to be given in front of a judge and a jury? Because at that point, it really does mean something. It doesn't matter what he says right now. It doesn't matter what you and I say right now. People need to go and see for themselves.
I agree. And they can do that at stoptoxicfandom.com. You can download these documents, or you can go to your, it's in GoFundMe. Is it GoFundMe?
Yeah, it's GoFundMe, yeah.
Your GoFundMe, the link is in the description. So help Paul get Alec into that courtroom, and maybe I'll have to put up a GoFundMe if he's going to sue me in federal court again.
He's not coming anywhere near. He's not coming to California, because he's already been hit with a slap violation out there. That's why he sued you in Georgia. Tried to sue you in California, and the attorney wouldn't take the case. Yeah. So he sued you in Georgia for that reason, literally to cause you harm, because he knew he couldn't go to California. Right. No, that's the we're talking about.
To cost me, tens of thousands of dollars, and to cause stress for the ladies in my life. Yeah. And for no reason. And it's frustrating, and needless. It just, you only have so much time on this planet. That's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, isn't there ways to spend your time better than this?
What did I say? Everybody's got one word. Yours is passionate, and his is unnecessary.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Paul, I want to thank you for coming on and doing another. You're welcome to come back anytime with more revelations. But I think the questions that you pose here and the information that you've shown and have been made available to all the donors at stoptoxicfandom.com, make up your own mind. You know, and I would ask the people that have been staunch supporters of Alec Peters to go download those documents, and you ask him. Those are available. Go put those tough questions to him. Don't.
Let me address that for 1 second before we do go. I think that's a good way to end this, right? I've been berated and attacked and yelled at by his supporters. They don't know me. They don't. You'd ask the question, why would you say something like that about me? You're doing it based on something that Alec Peters has told you I am, or whereas you have no evidence in your life, none whatsoever, no evidence that I'm worthy of being yelled at or screamed at or berated or disparaged, right? But you're in there anyway. You have just taken it upon yourself to join him in hurting other people. So two things. When you do that kind of thing, you need to look at yourself carefully and wonder what your goal is here. We're supposed to be trying to make this world okay, We're supposed to be trying to enjoy things like Star Trek and fandom. And I know from having looked at some of the troll hunter logs that there's one of the troll hunters who very clearly said, if you can show me evidence that Alec Peters misused this money, then I will be done for good. And a little bit of what I want to put to some of the people that do support him in this endeavor is this. Why don't take my word for it, don't take Rob's word for it, don't take anybody's word for it. Why don't you actually go and take a look at these numbers and add them up for yourself, and then you decide whether you should be asking questions about whether or not you're on the right side of history right here.
Well, I think that's a great way to leave it.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming on. This was great. Thanks for all the work that you've done. I want to thank my moderators, Tom Jr. Jackson and Mike Bodden was in the chat moderating. So, and Carlos and all the people over at Axanar for documenting a lot of this material and malfeasance. I want to thank you, even the time when I was on the opposite side of you guys. Thank you for being who you guys are. So, let's get Alec Peters into a courtroom and face-to-face with Paul Jenkins and ask him these questions in front of a judge during a real legal proceeding.
Yeah.
So that's a good goal for 2024. Make the world a little better place.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. On that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day.